Thank you all very much. Welcome again to the day 2 of our 3rd annual Stakeholder Advisory Board meeting for the SWD SCRI project. We will now begin with our agenda for the day 2, and there is a little modification in the agenda. As you see, our first item in the agenda is to get into objective 1 to discuss the plans for this coming year. Because of some issues we had yesterday toward the end of the day, we were not able to capture all stakeholders' summaries. And if you are a stakeholder that was not able to present share your experiences with SWD yesterday, we would like to hear from you before we get into the other agenda items for today. So I see some stakeholders here. Jimmy Click, can you hear me?
Hey Ash, yeah, I can hear you. How's it going?
Yeah. So can you please share your experiences with the SWD, because you do work with the lots of production.
Sure. Yeah, SWD's been bad again last year, so we're still looking for more solutions. We're I think our growers and Driscoll's have done a lot of work on decoy, so we're pretty excited about decoy and the new formulation that's out for that. I think that's on top of what they're currently doing. So the costs are going up for growers along with costs everywhere else. So I think anything around, economic evaluation and cost analysis is helpful. We still have a lot of growers in the world that are using mass trapping. And I have questions around if mass trapping is working or not. With the new technologies coming out around volatiles and traps, and I wonder if that is worthwhile. I'm sorry if that got covered yesterday. I might have missed it. Wasn't able to attend most of the day, but I'm here today. I see Agenor on the line. Hey, Agenor, obviously curious about ACTRA and commercializing that and getting that out. So we're not just dependent on one thing. It's a whole integrated approach. There's a few newer things on the market. Sutera's biomagnet. There's a couple other like trap and kill methods that are out there. So I'm curious about those. We're big on calcium silicate to firm the fruit and reduce infestation levels. So if there's any other ways to induce host resistance and make it harder for the flies to lay eggs into. One of our growers produces his own parasitoids. So parasitoid production of Ganaspis, and if there's any way to make that much more streamlined so that those can be mass produced at a larger scale. I think right now it's still in blueberry fruit. So there's a lot of appetite for streamlining the production of parasitoids. Yeah, those are kind of the top ones. I'm sure there's a few more, but right off the top of my head, that's what I got. So thank you everyone for having us.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate your comments. So do we have other stakeholders? I made a note of your comments, so I'll get somebody to respond. Cesar, would you mind commenting on attract and kill and mass trapping in particular? that is not focus of this project, but work has been done on this in the past.
Yeah, so I'll be providing an update on what we are planning on doing for behavioral control later, but and we can discuss more about this later when I give a talk. But to answer Jimmy's comment, we tried in the past mass trapping and it didn't work for us. We actually got more infestation at the sites where we placed the traps. We felt like, and also work that Larry Good was doing in Michigan State, and also that we did show that the flies don't actually enter. Only a small percent of the flies that you're attracting to the traps when we were using the containers actually get in the inside the container. So a lot of the flies are just being attracted to the surrounding areas where the containers are, where the traps are. So and we documented that. We never published that data, but other people also found similar results. We were doing this with Rich Coles from Connecticut at the time, and so we felt like that was something that we wouldn't pursue further at the time. That we felt like either like we would like find better trapping systems that actually caught most of the flies. Otherwise, it wouldn't work with the trapping system that we were using. I don't know. Now we're changing to the dry traps. I don't know if that will work better, but we also don't. I don't think that we catch, a lot of the flies with the dry traps either. So that would be also a similar concern. So that has been our experience. Like I know in Europe, early studies show that it could work, but a lot of these studies were done in small acreages. I think under high tunnels or things like that, where the movement of the flies was not much of a concern. But in large acreages, I don't think that's going to be. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, I think in some of the areas where we grow in Mexico, it's very common to have growers kind of create their own concoction of, raspberry puree, and their own trap, and then just put out 50 to 100 traps per acre. And yeah, we looked at it about 8 years ago with, I think, just yeast sugar traps, and wasn't a clear trend there. But yeah, just wondering with the new lures coming out, but it would need to be still affordable.
But Jimmy, in Mexico, I visited Mexico, and they grow the blueberries in the high tunnels, so that's limiting their movement. So I feel like maybe under those conditions, and also like putting a lot of traps, like as you said, which demands a lot of labor, but under the conditions where, at least in New Jersey, where we grow blueberries, I don't think that's feasible.
Mm-hmm.
With the number of traps that you would need.
Yeah. Cesar, you also worked on, I believe, Combi Protec last year, and I'm sorry if I missed your update, but that's something around attract and kill or bait sprays, and I think they have a new formulation that's coming out that should be much more user friendly than that sticky goo that they used to have.
Yeah, I'll mention that in my talk later.
Okay.
You're right. Yeah.
It was included in the update yesterday and will be discussed later. So just hang on. Do we have other stakeholders that were not able to share your experiences yesterday with us? If you are, please unmute yourself and give us a quick update. I see lots of names, but I don't recognize exactly where you are from. I see John Beadle. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm not a stakeholder here. I'm with New Jersey Department of Agriculture, Beneficial Insect Lab.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to our regular agenda, which is discussing plans for our objective 1, and I'll pass this on to Hannah Levinson, Hannah Brock, and Juan Waldron's team, objective 1 team.
Okay, thanks, Ash. So I'll share my screen really quickly to get us started. And with this, we'll start off basically where we left off with objective 1 yesterday, once that loads. So we'll start talking about the directions that we're thinking about going based on how the research has played out over the last couple of summers. And the topics we're thinking about focusing on is now that we have some optimized protocols for utilizing the salt wash or the flotation method to give real-time information about larval infestations in different fruits. We want to start looking at providing more detailed recommendations for how to incorporate this into your operations. So one idea we have is to trial creating a decision tree based around this salt wash method, depending on the infestation levels you get out of that and other factors. The other thing is now that we have multiple behavioral control tactics that are getting further down the line of development and testing, figuring out how these can be incorporated with some monitoring techniques and best management practices. And then the last topic is now that we have this parasitoid wasp that's being released for helping to control spotted wing, we also have Leptopolina that has established on its own here. We want to see how management efforts might be affecting these beneficial organisms, as well as we have some preliminary projects focusing on pollinators, documenting the pollinators that are in these fields and relating that to spotted wing management to see how those factors all play together. So yesterday we shared a link to a Padlet with you all to hopefully get some discussion going, and I'll switch my screen really quick to that Padlet. One second, I can't see all of my screen. Okay, so we have a couple questions for you all, and I can put these questions in the chat as well. Thank you, Hannah, for including the link. So I thought we'd start here, and we can just, this is very flexible. We can just see where the discussion goes. But the initial questions we have to hopefully instigate some group discussion is what tools that we talked about yesterday and then I quickly briefed about today are you already using on your farm? What tools are you interested in learning more about? It could be the ones we talked about if you haven't used them or if you've heard of others that weren't part of that discussion. Is there research you'd like to see completed next summer that hasn't been discussed yet? And then just any other thoughts you have. So the Padlet, this screen I'm sharing will pop up in that same link. And the questions are also included in the chat box. And I'm gonna open it up from there. Hannah and Vaughn, if you have any other thoughts to get discussion going, otherwise I'd be happy to hear from any stakeholders.
Yeah, and maybe just some guidelines on how we can best incorporate folks' feedback. If you look down at the bottom of your Zoom window, there's a little button that says reactions. If you click on that, there's a raise hand function on the very bottom. If you do that, we can see who is interested in speaking and sharing their thoughts about a question or a comment. That way we don't have people kind of jumping in on top of each other. So if you could use that raise hand function, the nice thing is it pops you right up into the top of the window so we can see who's interested in participating. So I encourage y'all who are interested in providing insights into those topics to either raise your hand or to type that info into the Padlet, and we can share that orally.
I see us, we don't have, Jimmy is here, but we have, yesterday we had the AgriCare people here, Lady Base was here, and I've had a meeting with that group before this meeting, and the idea that they shared with me was the importance of monitoring. The reason why Letty is actually on the team is because they realize the value of monitoring and reducing costs. So in the past 3 years, through pretty extensive monitoring team and program that they monitor twice a week. They've been saving up to 75 from their initial spray costs. So they were looking at significant spray costs, and this was organic. And they've dropped those numbers down on average to about 50% of those costs, and in better case scenarios up to 75%. So I do think that the monitoring is really important. And the data that was shared yesterday from both of the Hannahs, looking at the surrounding vegetation or not surrounding, on the edges of the crop, is really important as an early tool. In certain high pressure years, there is value in doing the egg monitoring because it buys you a little bit of time. You can save the crop by using systemic or translaminar type pesticides, which kills the larvae in the fruit itself. And so I think that's a really good step, and it would be nice to start looking, as we said, at the parasitoids. Our stakeholders are extremely excited about both the parasitoids as well as some of the behavioral controls that have been developed. So in my understanding, this is what our growers are going to be focusing on this year and would like to focus. That's what they would like us to work on as well.
So Loeb Lab crew, I see your hand raised.
Hi all. I don't know if this is the best place for this, but I'm thinking more about the smaller growers. I believe some of the growers that Vaughn's working with are pretty large. They have dissecting scopes to kind of implement the larval or fruit washing. And I'm just wondering, for smaller operations that don't have that, do we have any protocols that could get at the right answer without relying on using the scopes? I mean, I don't know where we're at with that. We talked about microwaves and things like that, but I thought I would open it up if this is the right time to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Greg. And you can get a lot of the way to getting most of the larval sizes distinguished with like commercially available tabletop magnifier, as long as you have decent vision that you're working with. You don't necessarily need a microscope to do it, but you do if you're trying to count small larvae, you need some form of magnification. So you could use a cheaper tabletop style magnifier to do that. And we've done that in various types of sample processing. We have one that one of those book reader type magnifiers that clips to the edge of a desk with lights attached to it. But we haven't systematically worked that into our protocols. And so that would be good to test out. I think that speaks to kind of a larger question that Nate raised in the chat as well, which is the kind of technology transfer element of these monitoring recommendations that we're developing. What we've seen from folks, in this and other projects, is when we demo monitoring techniques on someone's farm, there's a period of time where they want you to keep doing the monitoring, right? Because it's, a service that you're providing, and that's super understandable. But also that's not sustainable in the long term. And so I think we're for some of these monitoring tools, there is optimization that we can continue to do and make things lower cost, easier, simpler. But there's also the technology transfer element of how we deliver that to folks. And I'll just put out there one thing Hannah L. and I have talked about is trying to invite our stakeholders to be with her when she comes out and does her field visits, and that she would start doing a salt processing of some samples in the field, and do it in the field, either bring a magnifier or bring one of our field scopes out with us, set it out on the table, and just show them, like, here's what we're seeing in real time. Here's how long it's taking us to set this up. Here's what it looks like when we have larvae coming out, and illustrate to them how relatively straightforward it can be, and how, like, some of the tricks and techniques that we've learned over time to make things simpler and easier. Because similarly in the Padlet and in some of the chat yesterday, there was a comment that with blackberries, saltwater testing was super cumbersome, from one of our California stakeholders. And I completely understand that. I have soaked so many blackberries in salt water, and I know that that can be a pain in the butt. And so we've learned some optimization techniques and some tricks that we use to make that simpler on our end. And if we're doing that directly with some of our stakeholders, we can share those verbally in addition to kind of writing them down and having a more physical way of doing that. Maybe we should also be making, I'm spitballing here and I'm going to stop in 2 seconds, but maybe we should also be making videos of some of these things now that we're getting to where we've got a rough consensus of some of these methods. But so I think that tech transfer element is something we should think about, as well as the optimization element.
Phil, I think I saw your hand first. And then we can go down the list.
I think Vaughn was there, but I'll jump in. Yeah, I think the method with the microwave that Greg mentioned was one that Bruce Hall from Wyman's brought up last year. We had every intention of kind of comparing our super detailed salt test method and their method last season, but we just never got any infestation. But I can get them to write up the method they've been using. It's the old USDA method that was used for blueberry maggot fly back in the simpler days. But I can get them to write up their method and share it with folks if they think it's useful for our stakeholders. So that's a method that our stakeholders are using here in Maine. It's not as detailed as our salt test method, but it is a method that is, usable.
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think the question is, what do we lose when we use these other techniques, whether it's a magnifying glass or the microwave approach? I mean, that's back to research, I think, but maybe we need that information for those growers that are going to use that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say similarly, it'd be great to get that protocol and compare and see how it differs. Vaughn, do you want to go?
Sorry, the reason why I was raising my hand, I remember this one summer where the growers were saying, we think we have an issue. And this was we went to several blocks and we were walking through the field. And, that data that you showed yesterday, and we've shown it, multiple research groups have shown that data where the edges of the field is always the high risk area. You literally walk to those locations and, it's not me looking at the fruit. It's the grower who looks at the fruit. They will immediately find the fruit that looks soft and they'll open that up and they'll find the larvae in those. It feels to me as if, using these other tools, using the salt, the data is already there, but I think it needs to be done in combination. And I think, in certain cases, you can determine your risk just by looking on the edges. But you need to have a statistical rigor associated with that. And I'm not the best person to do that. I'm sure that there would be really good people who can help us with that data. But it is really, I do think it is possible just looking at it visually. So Nate was saying, you know, we can't do the salt, we can't do that methodology when we're a smaller grower, but it is possible to look at the edges, but what the precision of that is very difficult to say. I don't know what that precision is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing that I want to keep in mind with all of this is that with the data, we showed a few examples yesterday from North Carolina blackberries, but this has come up from other states as well, that when you're able to see the large larva by your eyes, you're already weeks behind on trying to control that initial infestation. So once you see large larva, or if the larva are at high enough detection levels that you're just seeing it in your collections of your fruit, that's already weeks late. So we're trying to give options for people to catch the earliest detections in their fields, and that's egg counting and small larvae. And I do totally want to respect that technology is hard to get and resources are hard to get, but there's a balance there that I think could be met with the savings from early detection. So definitely something that we'll keep in mind while we optimize this. And then I saw Dale's hand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those small growers, and I guess my question is, do actual numbers of small larvae matter for a small grower, or I just go on presence absence? And which gets back to adult trapping. And at least in New York State, it seems like the recommendations have been that, okay, if you're finding adults in the traps, you're at risk. And for people that are choosing to spray, that's when they start some type of spray program. So I'm not sure, you know, for small growers, I think we need to keep in mind to keep it simple. And I think the presence absence aspect works pretty well for small growers that are willing to do that work. I think it's a matter of getting out and demonstrating that it's really not that much work. And, you know, we use small black containers with a salt solution in it. And we see, I don't know that we're seeing the very smallest larvae, but we're seeing smaller than large larvae for sure, if we see it at all. I did also just want to mention, yesterday in my update, I didn't mention that there are a lot of resources available now for people that are interested in using the exclusion netting. There's 5 videos available on how to set up a system, how to apply the netting, things like that. And we actually got an article published in Scientia this year about the exclusion netting. And I think those resources should be linked on the SWD management site, because they are published resources, and I think getting the word out about them is really important, because for small growers, the exclusion netting works, and then you're not having to worry about all this other stuff.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in before we go to Steve, I think the question about presence absence is a really good one that we need to start unpacking more in the context of fruit sampling. We've been binning our fruit samples in large volumes of fruit, well, large-ish volumes of fruit, like clamshell size volumes of fruit. And so then we can say whether that sample is infested, but not necessarily whether any one given berry is infested. With the egg counts that we've been doing, it's much easier to say like what the percentage of infested fruit are in with those data. And that to me, I think that's something we need to do a little bit more of, because that would give us the ability to say what a presence absence sample means in the context of fruit infestation. And relating that to trap captures continues to be such a tricky thing with this bug, because once we hit July, you're guaranteed to find flies in a trap. But you're not necessarily guaranteed to find fly, at least, in the Southeast, you're not necessarily guaranteed to find infestation in your fruit. And so we know that now after lots and lots of years of looking at infestation dynamics across different crops, but we don't have the same scale, like fine scale of data to be able to unpack that presence and absence for eggs versus small larvae versus large larvae in fruit. And I think that I think that's a useful tool to be able to say, because that's really what's going to make fruit sampling the easiest thing is if you go out, you take X number of fruit, you dump them in salt, you see larvae or no larvae, and you can make that distinction without having to count them. And right now we just, like, as Vaughn said, the statistics are the thing that we're like trying to get personal comfort and rigor with. So I think that's a really, that will streamline the process much further than any other optimization that we can do. If you can just say, yes, I see a larva, or no, I don't see a larva, and know what that means based on the number of samples you've taken or the volume of fruit that you're looking at.
Thanks, Hannah. Steve, do you want to
go? Sure. A lot of different threads here that are going on. This is a really good discussion. I wanted to mention, first of all, like sort of the method component. We're talking about ease of use. We have published on that, some of the optimization stuff, and we've got some fairly easy methods now that you take your fruit, toss it in some water, come back in a half hour, sift it through a coffee filter, and you're good to go. And you can get a cheap microscope on the back of your pickup truck for $300. I think there's a bigger issue is really sort of it's an extension problem of sort of translating this. Hannah had mentioned this too, translating this to growers, showing people how to do that. So it's really a big component of this is sort of teaching. I mean, I know how to do this, but I've been doing it for years and it's sort of second nature. But if you're a grower or a scout who's never done this before, there's definitely a learning curve. So that's one point. Another point, Bill had mentioned the microwave. We had tried the microwaving. It doesn't work with like a coffee filter because the fruit dissolves and it just gums up the works. I mean, you can definitely go back to that sort of type of method, but again, that's a cost benefit analysis as far as like time investment versus what you're going to get out of it. And generally those sort of, if you're looking in a pan, it's going to take you longer to look for larvae, unless like what Dale and Hannah had mentioned, like sort of the presence absence component. And at least our experience in our Michigan blueberry scouting is we are able to do more than just presence absence. And part of that is we have sort of larger fields and you've got a clear woods border that has high pressure, and we'll see larvae coming into the fruit right at the border, and it's not a problem in the actual crop itself. So you kind of get an early warning sign and you can tell how high the pressure is or whether they need to sort of do additional insecticide applications based on how many larvae you're seeing show up in those fruit. And a lot of this infestation is not infestation that's going to carry through to harvest because they're spraying on a regular basis and those larvae are getting killed in the fruit. So they're never making it to the harvest. When we pull those fruit out and like try to rear out adults, we don't get any adults. So those larvae always die. So you get this sort of early indication without having to worry. And so there is some level of where you can tell sort of the number of larvae will help you sort of decide what kind of control options you use, but we haven't quantified that. And there's more work that does need to be done on that because it is a tricky thing to sort of use that to make management decisions. Yeah, that's all I had.
Thanks, Steve. Dylan, go ahead.
Yes, so here in Washington, we've partnered with our engineering department to develop kind of a AI-assisted image analysis of this like filter method with the goal of identifying and counting SWD larvae of different size. It's very preliminary, but the end goal would be hopefully to develop this into some sort of like smartphone enabled app that growers could just use in the field and like take an image and have it count and identify those different larvae. Very preliminary, but hope to update folks as we progress with that.
Thank you. That sounds very cool. I'll be excited to see more about that. Okay, so Lots of good thoughts about the fruit sampling. I've been taking notes. We really appreciate all of that. Some other monitor. Well, Jimmy, do you have a comment before we move on?
Yeah, I've been writing some things in the Padlet site, but yeah, we use yellow sticky alpha scents with alpha scents lures. It's just an easy way to quickly trap for adults. And we did look at 1 year, we also collected fruit and did see a correlation between trap counts and larvae counts, positive correlation. So I'm just curious if there's any work being done or has been done around, correlating counts, adult counts to infestation levels, and looking at modeling and ultimately have that crystal ball to be able to predict, if infestations are coming. And so any kind of work around that, I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah, Phil, I saw you unmute, and I think there's a bunch of us on this call who tried to do that, but I'd invite anyone who's done that sort of work to jump in. But Phil, go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, we've done it in Maine, so we do have kind of a threshold model. It's not perfect, but it does work and growers use it here. So we use 3 yeast sugar traps at each site. I can send you details later, Jimmy, but we only set a threshold of 3, but that can save a spray, every year or so. So if we have an average of 3 males, and it's based on males because it's easier for the growers to see the males, that would give us a 10% probability of having infestation in our fruit the next week. So this was based on a whole load of trapping data and the probability of having infestation the next week. That was based on 5 years of data. We've added another 3 years. So we're readjusting our threshold recommendations this winter. So yeah, it doesn't work in every system, I don't think. I mean, we have very harsh winters. SWD, used to show up rather predictably here. It's shown up 2 weeks earlier every year for the last 3 years. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
I think we've also been looking at not the alpha scent, but using a trace A. I mean, Benita has actually been running that. And it's variable, that correlation between trap catch males and infestation. In New York, most of the time we see a statistically significant correlation, but many of our sites that have done that have not. I don't know, we don't know exactly why. Hannah mentioned this yesterday too, but we think part is this: when you start spraying, when a grower starts spraying, somehow that kind of interferes with that connection. We could look a little more detail, but right now I'd be hard pressed to have a much confidence, at least as you get into the season, using the male captures, adult male captures, to, I don't know, predict your risk. I think at the start of our season, because we're also fairly far north, it might be more useful, but maybe in the middle of the season it might not be.
Yeah, I agree. This is really just for early season. When do you start your spray program? It's really to get people to stop jumping the gun and going in there too early.
Yeah, and I'll say in North Carolina, we've done that in blackberries for 2 years and shared that information with the Loeb Lab. And I don't think we found a correlation at any of our sites. So similarly to what was already said, I think once the pressure gets high enough, the correlation is not clear.
Jimmy's hand is up.
Jimmy was doing thumbs up.
I was just doing a thumbs up.
Yeah. So what would folks like to see transition to on-farm research for next year? And this can include things that you heard broadly from all of the objectives or things that you've heard of elsewhere. It helps us think about what the suite of options are to communicate with our grower task force members about possible implementation on their farms.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
And again, sorry if this was brought up or discussed already, but you know, I mentioned a few things at the introduction this morning. I think one other thing I'm curious about is lure and infect approach. There's been some work done on microbial control of SWD, but these guys are pretty, these guys and gals are pretty social, and you know, I think there's a lot of work into frittids around lure and infect, where they spread the fungal spores to others, and you end up getting a crash in population if conditions are right and all that. So I don't know if that's in this group or anyone is working on that.
Yeah, Phil, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. I don't know if this tightly relates, Jimmy, but we did some work with just mixing in yeast in with insecticides as an attract and kill, with mixed results, I would say, but maybe Phil would maybe want to comment on that. Phil, do you have something to add to that, more specific or more detailed?
Yeah, I think that kind of gets into the use of phagostimulants, which comes back to the Combi Protect stuff that I think Cesar is going to cover later on. So it's not really like attract and infect. It's more of attract and get them to fill their gullet with as much insecticides as we can.
By the way, I was at a grower meeting a couple of days ago. No, I guess it was just yesterday. And one of the growers asked about this product they were spraying on their fruit crops. It was a yeast product called Seed or something like that, or Success or something like that. And he said, well, he was spraying it for nutrition reasons, but he said the spotting was horrible in that section, so he stopped doing it. But it just got me thinking, if it's that attractive, maybe we could combine it with a toxicant or something in a way that would be effective. Anyhow, I just wonder if anybody heard of that product. Yeah, I'll look more into it. I think it's horticultural, maybe what that organic growers do or something, but it's a yeast-based thing.
Tobin has a comment in the chat. Tobin, you wanna?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit if you want. One of my grad students in Australia has been working on the defritted Queensland fruit fly. And based on that and then the spotter wing, we have been doing some modeling to look at how that attract and infect works. And one of the things that we've found, just to develop some general theory, some of the key factors are how often they mate, obviously, because the more times they mate, so is this the thing where you track males and then you get them to infect females and so one of the key factors is how often they mate. But the other thing that we were looking at is you can't have it works best if you have a pathogen that has intermediate virulence. If you kill it too fast, the male dies before it mates with the female. But if you don't kill it enough, then the female doesn't. You don't have a big enough effect on reproduction. So that's one of the key take homes. But we're continuing to develop that theory, and I'm happy to share the paper when it comes out if you're interested.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Thanks, Tobin.
Jimmy, go for it.
I don't know if this fits here, but you know, there's some published work on field trials done with SIT, sterile insect technology, out of the UK with Big Sis. And you know, there's a few other players in this arena. Does that fit with this group, or is that something? I know Jana's working on that, but I that with that the way they achieved sterility, you know, I think genetically modified. I don't know how that's going to be perceived by the public, and you know, if growers start using those. So I'm, you know, curious on the SIT approach. We like the way Big Sis is doing it. Just I think gamma ray radiation. So yeah, just curious how that fits, or if anyone's dabbled in that world.
You
Yes.
missed big time yesterday.
Sorry about that.
We had a big presentation on this.
I guess I missed that.
Yes. So we still have, you know, again, Biocentis is another company from UK. They are working on that, again, genetically modified concept where sterile male or self-limiting technology. And we do have their representatives on the call. I saw them earlier. Do we have anybody from Biocentis on the call now? They basically presented their technology in our grower comments period yesterday. And they are very interested in collaborating with stakeholders and researchers here in the US. Again, concerns were that they'll be perceived as GM, and regulations and all those limitations will be the ones that can be problematic down the road or can slow it down.
So I can drop a couple links in the chat box too, because this is something on the regulatory end of things that members of my group have been looking at for several years, is trying to understand the public perception and regulatory elements of gene drive specifically, but that would apply also to genetically sterile flies. So I think a couple things, these are my personal reactions, and so, you know, filter that through whatever you want to filter that through. If we're talking a genetically sterile fly, which would then have essentially the same principles required for an effective SIT release, which would be overwhelming the existing population in order to drive the numbers down. So, you know, genetically sterile fly is one that you're just not using radiation to sterilize, and so that's the distinction. You'd still have to release many, 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 many flies in order to make your population smaller. And I think the challenge that we have with both that and a radiation or chemosterilized fly is that we don't have good population estimation methods for this insect yet. And so knowing the volume of flies that you would need to release in order to crash a population or even decrease a population is going to be a challenge for us. To me, that'd be the most successful time to do that work would be at the beginning of a year following a winter period in a system in which the flies are starting to initiate infestation. But, you know, if you look at caneberry production in mid to late summer, that's probably not the system that's going to give you great suppression, because your ambient populations are so large that the volume of flies you would need to release in order to suppress a population would also need to be quite large. A gene drive model would be different if you had to deal with, and there are some gene drive systems in the laboratory that have been developed that drive deleterious genes into the population and initiate population suppression that way. But just, and again, this is personal opinion, do we want to be the first ones that do that? Because there is no extant gene drive system in agricultural pest management at this point. And so I think that's just a question to ask ourselves, is like, is this the right test case for this? given the possible complexities that we might run into in terms of public perception. But I can drop some of the links for the work that's been done by my social science colleagues looking at perceptions related to spotted wing and genetic pest management.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. Thank you, Hannah.
The group that presented yesterday, they've been working with mosquitoes, like lots of those gene drive work teams have done, and they got some funding, obviously, through some NGOs, and have made a lot of progress on that front. The first field releases of those mosquitoes were recently allowed in Florida at some point, I heard, or somewhere in California. Not sure exactly what the situation is, but yeah, no other precedents in ag systems yet.
And the one system in which they tried to do some field work related to a genetically modified insect, Greg, I'm sure knows a lot about, because it, had significant backlash in his backyard. So I don't know if we want to be the ones stepping out there necessarily.
All right, so I think we only have like 4 minutes left, and we've had some really, really great discussion. One thing we did not touch on yet is looking at how to incorporate monitoring methods with protecting the different beneficial insects we've talked about. So maybe in the last few minutes, if anyone has feedback on that and how we could start looking at that in the next field season.
All right, thanks, Hannah. And we do have really good comments from Dale about netting. Netting made cheaper, I guess. Dale's creativity has made it a lot more affordable than we have thought about. Dale, do you have any sort of published magazine articles or some information about these nettings and sourcing materials that you have used? I know you have done a lot of work on that.
Well, I think the Scientia article covers a fair amount of it. I'll be interested in certainly seeing the economics from that Miguel's group finishes with. They're working more on our blueberry netting versus the high tunnel netting. But, I've now used netting on our fall raspberry tunnel for 6 years, the same netting for 6 years with less than 2% infestation. So I don't know how you beat that. And when you look at the cost of the netting for covering a 144-foot long tunnel, it works out to be $65, $70 a year for the netting per year. So $300 for a tunnel, and that netting is going to last for 5 to 10 years. So, I don't know what is cheaper than that. We don't have to spray, and it's a pretty great system that is working for us. So the Scientia article covers some of that, but I think maybe it's another project for Miguel's group is after they get the blueberry work done to look at some of the high tunnel work and be doing a complete economic analysis and a predictor tool that people can use.
Right, thanks, Dale. Would you mind sharing those articles and also the videos you mentioned? We can put those up at our SWD project website.
Yeah, I put them in the chat, the YouTube video site, and then Chris Callahan from UVM Extension has put together a spotted wing Drosophila netting page, and I've got the link listed in the chat for that as well.
Yeah,
I just have to look up the link for the Scientia article.
yeah, I would appreciate if you can share that. We'll be able to post it on the SWD website.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and feedback. Let's move on to the next objective, which is objective 2. And it is to develop economics-based CNA tools, and Miguel and Karina's team is going to lead that.
Yeah, Ash, and I'm not going to put my video because my internet connection is not very good here. And if you don't hear me, please let me know. And Bing Yan, who is there, can present. Karina cannot be here today, but I know what to present for her. So first, before I go, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you, Phil. I see you nodding. So yes, so this is a good segue to what Delilah was saying, because one of our main objectives for this year is to complete the work that we are doing on exclusion netting in New York, and that is we are going to finish the interactive tool and the analysis, the economic analysis, very soon. I think that by the end of the semester, in 2-3 months. And then it's good to hear, Delilah, that the feedback, because then we will definitely move to the other analysis that you mentioned, and we are ready to note here. So that will be one of the activities this year. The other aspect that is a continuation of what we are doing. So now we have an economic analysis of blueberries in Oregon with Vaughn. In fact, he's sending me additional data to help us with the sensitivity analysis, but we have a pretty good model. So the next step is for us to do 2 things, 3 things with that. One is submit these results to an academic journal to validate the results, and at the same time to work on the interactive tool in Excel. And the third component to the analysis of fruit sampling in Oregon is we plan to extend it at least to 1 more state, and that will be Michigan. We have been in conversation with Root Food last year. We never did that because the analysis in Oregon is taking longer. Yeah, so those are continuation, and of course, the way we operate in the economics group is we are demand driven. You know, if there is a need and you have the data for a particular issue, please let Karina or I know, because we will be happy to work on what is the most pressing need. The only condition, sometimes we just need some data from the agronomic side and for the economic side to do the analysis. Yes. So then, and regarding the new projects that we want to start working with other members of the group that we haven't started yet, is the first is to evaluate how pesticide resistance may affect the effectiveness of or the economics of controls. And the working hypothesis here is that of course, as the pesticide resistance increases, there are more incentives to implement IPM strategies. So there is already a documentation of pesticide resistance in California berry farmers. So there is some data that we can start working on to start with the basics of the analysis. And another question there is we would like to do different projections or scenarios of resistance development and understand, because maybe the optimal response in terms of IPM strategy to select may be sensitive to that. So, for example, it may be, and this is just an example, that fruit sampling with early harvest, which is the best strategy that we have identified in Oregon for blueberry farmers, it may not be the best if resistance to pesticides is too high. So that's an example. So that's one that we would like to start, and we would like to. We are going to reach out once we finish, have solid work with exclusion netting and with the working in Oregon, that paper is in review. The idea is to start with this aspect. The other aspect that we would like to start is to estimate the long-term cost benefits of biological control approaches. How do we measure that? Binyan is particularly interested in both resistance and biological approaches, because she could choose one of those to focus one of her essays for her dissertation. So we will. The plan is to start with both. Oh, and sorry, I forgot also to mention in the work in analyzing the economics of fruit sampling, we also know that Phil Fanning in Maine is also very interested. So we can start because in addition to Binyan, we have a master student who is very interested in this topic, so that's the plan, to have two researchers here. So that will be my let's say my part. So now from Karina, her future work for blueberries and sweet cherries in Washington. And her objective will be to estimate and assess the economic impacts of proposed SWD management strategies on profits. And in her methodology, she's going she's basically using the same approach that we are using, is just focusing on blueberries and cherries. What she has been very careful at is in developing the crop budget that are the building blocks for this analysis, and to really understand the what type of pesticides are being used. So she's going to develop the enterprise budget for blueberries, and she's going to do organic and conventional, and for sweet cherries, only conventional in sweet cherries, that will reflect current standards. And she also is doing several varieties. Okay, and then she's going to use partial budget analysis to estimate the cost and benefits of proposed strategies that she's working with scientists in Washington State. So particularly also, she is interested in analyzing the feasibility of using extend day in sweet cherries that indirectly mitigates the reproduction of SWD. So that's something that she's interested, and she will be, the objective is to have already publication of outputs by the end of the year. I think that covers the planned work in terms of the economics. So one thing that we want to do also, because that I forgot to mention, is that the fruit sampling and fruit sampling strategies, we can extend it to New York also, because we also have good data at the moment. So and the message for other states, if you have good data and you are interested in this type of analysis, please let me or Binyan or Karina know. Karina is specializing more on the West Coast economic analysis, and I do more of the East Coast, just because proximity. But we are collaborating in all the work. So that's it, Ash. I don't know if I need to provide more detail, but I think it's pretty straightforward. If there are things that we are not doing that we should be doing, that will be great to know. Or if we are things that we are doing that are too obvious that we shouldn't be doing, so please let us know as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Hannah. And yes, I will be happy also to work in North Carolina. I think with Adeline, who is still collaborating with us, she's in USDA now, and with Binyan, we nailed down the approach to economic analysis. So we can be much more effective, and that will be great to do as many regions and crops as possible. Thank you. So we will take note, Hannah. Thank you. Greg, please go ahead.
Hey, Miguel, just to back up a little bit with the work on exclusion netting and blueberries. If I heard you right yesterday, the modeling right now is focused more on the economic benefits and costs for organic blueberries. But is there any reason why that can't be made flexible for either organic or conventional?
There is no reason, Greg. Exactly. Thank you. No, we can do it for conventional and yes, for conventional too. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, it is. We did it for organic because we feel that is the one that we have more data because it always, there is the cost of doing the first study is higher. Now moving to other crops, regions, systems will be much easier. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah. And thank you to you and Benita for being so generous, sharing all the data with us, and Delilah too, and has shared a lot of data with us. Mm-hmm.
And Steve too, who actually.
Yeah, and Steve. Sorry, Steve. Yes. Yeah. Delilah.
Miguel, did you say that you either have or are going to have partial budgets for how much spotted wing control costs? Is that been done, or is that going to be done?
It is we did a preliminary analysis, Delilah, and yesterday I presented that. I don't know if my audio was good, but yeah, we so far with the organic system in blueberries, we know that, for example, exclusion netting paid by itself after all the infrastructure investment that you have to do paid by itself after year 3 of using it, and then gains are clear after that, year 3 to 10. So, and we are using relatively conservative estimates. So yes, so we want to share with you, because you have given us the data, the economic analysis, to make sure it makes sense, to make sure that is to provide face validity. So that we will be doing that soon.
Okay. Well, the main reason I ask is that probably a lot of the group isn't aware of the fact that, at least in New York State, we were able to get NRCS to at least contemplate doing cost sharing on the netting. And we've been trying to get it so that it can be an approved practice at the national level rather than just individual states requesting it. And I'm thinking that economic information could help build the case for that, for getting it approved at a national level. And anyone that can send information as far as like state grower groups that may write letters of support for that. The NRCS in New York State has said to get it approved at the national level, it's going to be far more successful, or have a higher chance of success, if we get a lot of states requesting it. So if we can get that economic information as far as what it's costing people just for spotted wing management, and the yields that they're losing because of spotted wing, and then get states to work together, I think we have a much better chance of getting it approved at the national level. And that obviously is then also going to change the economics and make it even more viable for people.
Yeah, thank you. And that gives us more a sense of urgency to complete this analysis. There is evidence, as you know, from Minnesota. Gigi DiGiacomo has done some studies that are relevant. So there is an emerging. So if we are able to demonstrate this for several states, it will provide several states and several crops. It will definitely help, and yes, so that gives us a sense of priority for this, Delilah. So thank you. Any other questions or suggestions, or if you have other comments later on, please feel free to email me or Binyan or Karina. Thank you. I think I don't have anything else to share, Ash.
Thanks, Miguel. Appreciate it very much. All right, let's move on to the next objective, which is objective 4. As you can see, we have switched the order because Cesar was doing some teaching at this time, and that's why we had to switch some order of objectives here. So let's move on to objective 4, which is Joanna and Rufus, and any team members from those labs, please take it over. Do you have Steve Van Timran, Fatima, or Christine? I see Christine.
Hi. Yeah, I have slides on the plans for the upcoming year for the molecular mechanism section, but I don't know if Fatima is going to join us to show her part. So if that's okay, I can start.
I guess you can go ahead and get started, and then Fatima joins in, then she can share her part.
Sure. Okay. So yesterday I mentioned to you guys that we found evidence of 4 different molecular mechanisms of insecticide resistance in the SWD population. So we saw penetration resistance, metabolic resistance, as well as target site resistance in lines that are resistant to either spinosyd or pyrethroid. And then we also identified splicing as a new mechanism, and we saw evidence of differential splicing in all the lines tested for both spinosyd and pyrethroid. From our study, we were able to find several different genes that we could use as a molecular marker for identifying either penetration resistance, so these top 3 graphs up here, or penetration resistance, which are the bottom 2 here. And we can actually use these 5 genes to develop a molecular diagnostic, as well as add other genes. So right now I am using these 5, and then I'm also looking for additional genes that we can use in a qPCR-based assay similar to this, or a TACMAN based assay. So that's what we have in the upcoming year. The other thing that we could do is identify the molecular mechanisms for organophosphate resistance. So we've already sequenced lines that are resistant to malathion using both Illumina and PacBio. And someone in our lab is in the process of performing the bioinformatic analyses to look at either penetration resistance, metabolic, or target site, as well as splicing. And then, so that's all I have slide-wise, but the final thing that we are doing this year is we're actually performing functional analysis data. So we are knocking down some of the genes, so some of these cytochrome P450 genes and Tweedle genes in Drosophila melanogaster, and then seeing whether that changes their susceptibility to insecticides. So to, I guess, accompany our molecular data, we'll also have bioassay physiological data in a melanogaster mutant. Have any questions on what we plan to do in the upcoming year? Yeah, see Jimmy has raised his hand.
Hey, Christine.
Sure.
Are you offering this as a service as well, where folks could send you flies? You could tell them if they're resistant or not to, I think you said, organophosphates and spinosins?
I think that's something that we could start doing, is doing that as a service, since we have the facilities to do it. But I think eventually maybe we could kind of assign it to someone else to do it as like a full-time thing in addition to our research. Thank you for your question.
Cool, thanks.
And then I see Tobin hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering, do you know if it's possible to determine or roughly estimate the fitness cost to these resistance to see how likely they are to spread or develop management protocols?
Yeah, great question. So actually, Frank Zalem's lab, so Fatima, is actually looking at how long the resistance is persisting after spraying, and then seeing what those fitness costs are. But just based on the molecular data, we could see that a lot of the genes involved in DNA replication and DNA repair are actually much lower. So it seems to be that at the genetic level, there is a fitness cost associated with the resistance. So I would assume that if we were to stop spraying, it would actually go away over time because it's not advantageous to the insects.
That's interesting. Thanks a lot.
Yes. Are there any additional questions?
All right. Do we have Steve Van Timmeren? Steve, do you have any plans from the field population screening aspects?
Yeah, so we don't have any official plans for this coming year, other than if there are individual collaborating labs who want to continue doing monitoring. We're not planning on doing any monitoring in Michigan, but if there are labs, I know in previous years we've talked about sort of coordination of testing. So we do have that option if there are collaborators who have concerns about resistance. If they could send us flies, that's an option that we could test those in the fall. Obviously, we can't test a whole bunch, but that's still an option. And we can discuss how much testing we may or may not want to do. I know Washington has done some testing this year. Yeah, Greg?
Along those lines, Steve, when I go to talk to growers and stuff, they're obviously very concerned about insecticide resistance, and I report kind of the results that you've gotten in Michigan and Georgia relative to California, where we're not seeing resistance yet to a lot of these insecticides. But what I mentioned is that if they see control failures, they ought to let me know. But I'm wondering if you have any advice on kind of what maybe I should be looking for to kind of pursue those sorts of things, or any of us who are working with growers. I mean, there's many reasons why they get control failure, but is there, I don't know, which ones sound the most like they're due to insecticide resistance?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because I mean, at least what we found in Michigan is that very often it's not a resistance issue. It's a sort of it's a something, you know, insecticide application issue or it's your coverage issue, those sorts of things. So that's, you know, we've tried. Our first step is, you know, what are you spraying? When did you spray it? Did it rain? You know, it's trying to find the logical answer. And, you know, sometimes it's because it's late in the season and they're only spraying every fifth row, you know, it's that kind of thing. It's a very, that kind of very logical issue. That's, I mean, that's what we do here in Michigan. But yeah, I agree. I mean, trying to track down if it's, you know, what is the cause for a control failure. I mean, that's what we've done too, is where growers seem to be having issues. And especially if we're following up with growers who, you know, historically, if they've been doing this long enough that then they know the drill. And if they tell us that, you know, we had problems in this field, but they haven't had any problems for the past 10 years, that's more of a red flag than a grower who may not necessarily have as much experience, if that makes sense.
It does. All right, we won't bombard you with flies to assess unless it really makes sense. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean,
what
but
other people.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely can test flies, especially if you got infested fruit and you rear them out and you put them in vials and ship them to me.
Yeah.
It's actually a fairly easy, you know, if we're not doing like full dose response, just doing diagnostic dose testing, it's fairly easy for me to follow-up work can be a bit more involved, but that initial diagnostic dose testing is not hard for me to do if you have some suspect populations.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, Hannah?
So for that diagnostic dose testing, would it be easier to have vials sent out rather than having flies sent to the central lab?
That was what that's a good question. We had initially talked about that in previous years, but I know, I don't know, I think Frank Salem's on the call today, but he had some issues on, depending on who's doing the testing, that it can be, we have had some success with that in the past, but it depends on who's doing the experimenting and whether they're able to set up, you know, enough humidity or if they know how to handle the flies. So that is definitely a possibility. And we have done that in the past. But at least, you know, on my end, in some ways, it's almost easier for me to just do the testing on my end rather than treat vials, because it does get tricky because you have to treat the vials and then ship them out. So there, and then on the receiver's end, they have to make sure that they have all their flies set up in the right setup so that they're ready to do the bioassays as soon as they receive the vial. So there's the logistical component that in some ways it's less time investment just to like ship flies to say me, and then I can do those tests, if that makes sense. All right. I mean, anybody else? I mean, we don't have any big plans for that. We do have some outstanding data. That's another sort of open question about sort of pulling that together into possibly other publications, but I'm not sure that's necessarily relevant for this discussion as far as like projects moving forward.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that manuscripts that you had in the plans. Do you know if you have any sort of timeline?
Whether it's specifically with regards to the resistance or?
So there was another one. What was that? Skin thickeners work?
Yep. Yeah. I'm working on that. I was going to start working on that last week, but I took a pause on a lot of work with MSU stuff we had going on. So I'm planning on digging more into some of those manuscripts next week.
And we did discuss as far as national scales field population screening I guess in our objective meeting or one of the team meetings, we did discuss that as a major activity for the final year of this project. So our project ends August of 2024. So I don't know how to define the final year, because August may not be end of the field season for all of the states. And we obviously can go for a no-cost extension and call that a final year 2024 field season. I just wanted everyone's comment on that, as we already have done a national scale work and screening and published that, and wanted to follow up at the end of this project to see where we stand after a couple of years. Any comments from the team? So let's put it in a more close-ended way. Would there be interest in other states to participate in a national scale effort to do population screen? It's a yes or no question. Or raise your hand. Because we did multiple states at the beginning of this project, or maybe at the end of last project, and that was published, right?
Yeah, we'll probably screen some populations here in Maine anyway. We took a break this year, but the industry are definitely looking for a kind of another snapshot to see where we're at. So we probably will here in Maine.
Any other states? I guess we can discuss that in our objective team meeting. North Carolina is tentatively interested, depending on resource availability. Again, when we say national scale screening, it doesn't mean too many populations. You can select based on your situations with the collaborators to just 3, 4, 5 populations from those sites where there is a lot of frequent spraying going on. Those would be the potential sites where it may start at first.
Yeah, I mean, I will say we didn't have any plans to do any screening, but if there was interest in having that sort of another national snapshot, we could definitely do some testing on a few colonies. That wouldn't, on a few populations, that wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, I guess with Rufus and Joanna, we need to get together as a team, objective team, to discuss whether it's going to be this year or next year. So we just wanted to get at least one snapshot at the end of this project. That was in the, if you can bring it up with Rufus, and then we can follow up with our project team, objective team meeting.
Yep, I will.
All right, thanks, Steve. See if Fatima has joined. Fatima, have you joined us? Are you with us, Fatima? And she was in the call earlier, but no, I don't see her now. So let's move on to the next objective, and then we can get back to this one. And next in the agenda is objective 5, which is develop and disseminate actionable recommendations that enable producers to optimize pest management decisions and evaluate their impact, which is in Dr. Kay Kelsey and myself. So we'll start with the impact evaluation team and what their plans are for the next year and how we can, as a team and as stakeholders, can help them. So, okay. And
quick PowerPoint Dami put together for us. So, can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay, great. Okay, so the evaluation team this year, we thought it would be a good opportunity to do a national survey on all of the growers in the United States who may or may not have been directly affected by this team, but through diffusion of innovation and extension work across the country, we'd like to determine to what degree have your innovations and your management practices been diffused and adopted by growers. So that would equal impact. The ultimate goal of your project was to mitigate the SWD and control it. Seems like from this call today and yesterday that that's happening. growers feel like they have control of the situation due to your good work. Okay, so what we're going to do is develop a paper-based or electronic-based survey. We'd like access to all the berry and cherry growers in the United States, assuming that most of them belong to a growers association, and assuming that we have access to those associations, either through membership or affiliation. We'd like to do this in the summer of 2023, and we'd like to better understand how growers perceive the support that you offer, also the adoption rates of the various management practices that were developed. So this would give us a good idea of the reach and the scope of your efforts in accomplishing your goals. Okay, we need your help. We'd like your help in getting access to the growers associations. We'll be sending out an email asking you to identify the associations. We'll also be searching the internet with keywords to find associations. We'd like permission to borrow your gravitas by co-signing the recruitment letter. So we'll ask a couple of the PIs that have worked extensively with growers to co-sign the letter, so they recognize it as being legitimate and endorsed by yourselves. And we'd like your help in promoting the survey once it's distributed. Now, I realize that you're meeting with growers face to face, and handing them a paper survey in that context is probably very effective, but we're a little concerned about having people fill the survey out twice, not only in your face-to-face meeting, but also online when we roll it out online. So not quite sure how to resolve that. Maybe I can meet with a small group later and we can talk through that particular challenge. Are there any questions from the group about our plan?
So I have a question that's kind of project team specific, but I thought I might as well ask while we're all here together. How is authorship going to be handled on any publications that result from this survey for the people who are helping solicit participation?
Well, of course, Dami would be the first author as the person doing the majority of the work. I would be the second author, and we can certainly negotiate further authorship from there, from whoever else would like to be a part of that.
Thanks. I think that's just something to be clear on as we move into this, because if people are doing a fair amount of recruitment and follow up with folks, that might be something that they would like to see acknowledged.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, and we will definitely maybe put that on an agenda at one of our next team meetings.
So I had a quick question. One thing that Nate Norris had mentioned yesterday was just how growers are have been using like daily picking and sorting out their calls and, doing pruning. And those were all sort of outputs from some of our previous SCRI OREI projects. Is one of the goals of this survey to try to quantify some of these previous multi-state collaborative projects and how those sort of the outputs from those projects are being integrated into sort of grower systems right now. Is that one of the goals with this?
Yes, and I think you've provided feedback on the survey, Steve. Did we touch on those things to your satisfaction? Do we need to add another question, more questions?
Let me look based on sort of the feedback from this meeting. That's a good point. I'll look at the survey again. When is the final version of that survey? Like what's your sort of final date for that final survey?
We'd hope to roll it out this summer. And so April, May, June.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll take another look at it with based on some of the feedback we got from this meeting and some of our grower meetings. Thanks.
Okay. Dami, do you have anything else you'd like to add that we haven't already touched on today?
No, I think you already touched on everything. What I would just like to say is So I appreciate our stakeholders, especially our growers that actually took time to participate in this collection process last year. I want to say a very, very big thank you, and we're still leveraging on your support to accomplish this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess based on Hannah's question, Kay, oh, sorry. I think Loeb Lab has the hand up.
Thanks, Ash. Okay, just, I guess, to maybe help make sure we get information and feedback back to you. In terms of a timeline, when do you see finalizing the survey? And then sort of when, and so you said midsummer or something that this would go out. So maybe give us a deadline of getting feedback on the survey itself by what, I don't know, end of March or something like that. And
Yes.
that kind of thing that maybe get us acting a little bit more assertively.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Well, we're pretty close to feeling good about the survey. We've gotten feedback from at least 3 folks on this seminar, and I'm happy to send it out again to give folks another chance to look at it. We've applied for institutional review board. That's pretty much done. And the only thing that's slowing us down at this point is getting the list of the growers associations. And then the next step would be to contact them and gain their permission and buy-in for allowing us to send an email through their listserv so that the grower recognizes who it's coming from and it doesn't just go to their junk mail.
Okay. So I wonder, do you have a kind of in your mind a deadline for getting that information on the membership list? I mean, it's just something that, you know, how we're all busy and we prioritize, and I need to get it up on my list of things to do based on when you'd like it, whether it's tomorrow or next week or.
Okay, Dami is leading that effort. Dami, you want to chime in with your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking by mid-March that would be very okay if we could have all the corrections done from all the co-PIs involved, so that by April we can start administering the questionnaire. Thank you.
Mid-March, okay.
So just a quick comment on timing of a survey. There's sort of a season for our growers when you can expect them to fill out a survey, and a season when you can expect that email to get deleted or the paper thing thrown in the trash. And that's when they're growing your crops. If you send it during cherry harvest, nobody's gonna fill that out. So kind of November to February is the typical window for when we put out our surveys. And after that, it's the growing season.
Okay, November.
I was going to chime in with the same comment, Kay. I think you're gonna get lousy response rate if you roll it out in April, May, June, because that's when people are getting really busy, and so we usually pick up and get decent response rates, like starting in September, November, December, when people are going to grower meetings is kind of the best time to hit them, because you can remind them at the grower meetings that, like, hey, we sent this survey around, check for this email, or you can send it immediately afterwards so that they've heard about it. So I also agree, like, I think timing it for spring and summer is not going to get good responses.
Okay, when is our window closing this spring? You said March?
Yeah, I'd say
No.
next week.
Next week, okay.
We're already starting to like write spray recommendations on some of the crops.
Okay, yeah, okay. I hear you, and I think we cannot be ready by next week, so we'll have to put this off until the fall for the final administration. Now, Caesar was going to administer a paper copy at a meeting, but that's a pilot test that will help us understand if the questions are being answered completely and accurately. And we really want to distribute the majority of our surveys through online so that we can document that we're not having repeats or double counting. So that's one of our challenges in the administration. I understand that given it face-to-face increases the response rate of the group that's in front of you, but I'm afraid about, like I say, about people filling it out twice, over, going to a growers meeting and then receiving it through the email. So that's one of our challenges that we also need to overcome.
I think you'd have trouble getting people to fill it out once, let alone twice.
Right, I agree. Dale?
Yeah, I would certainly echo the comments about timing as a grower, that I don't fill out surveys during the summer. I am a little concerned about how to reach the smaller growers, especially in the Northeast, because a lot of them do not belong to grower associations. And so, at least not specifically berry grower associations. So you might want to broaden the group of grower associations that you send it to, particularly in the Northeast. To, you know, a lot of the grower associations are fruit and vegetable associations, and maybe contact some of the extension staff directly in those Northeast states and see how they can get it out through some of their listservs and such. And I really don't think you have to worry about anyone filling out a survey twice.
Okay, thank you. All right, great feedback. Okay, so Dami, you've taken notes and understand some of the challenges that we're facing ahead.
Yeah, but I think we touched on this in our last meeting too. So I'm actually aware and I keep abreast with those information. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all the feedback.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Kay. I guess you have now plenty of time to get comments and feedback and improve the survey. And some information from Cesar's group will also be good for you to see how it works out. And there are lots of grower meetings, November, December, January timeframe. Most of the big regional meetings also happen during that time frame. So that would be ideal 3 months to focus more on this. And at some point, I think based on Hannah's comment, it will be good to do a specific team meeting or maybe at our next monthly team meeting to discuss this, who's going to be participating and discuss the authorship as well. All right, thanks, Kay, Dami, and everybody else. And next in our agenda is our extension efforts. And as we have been doing in the past, we all participate in our local grower meetings at the county level, wherever is appropriate, at the state level, and also at the regional level. We try to do as much as presentations as possible and to disseminate information to farmers. A couple of things that we do as a group, and one key output is our annual webinar. And I would like to at least tentatively put this on the calendar. And wanted, based on our last 2 or 3 years of experience, that late November, early December timeframe sort of works better for farmers. This year we had only 2 to 3 weeks notice, and we got about 300 people sign up to join the webinar. And this year, I would like to give them more time. If we are able to sort of schedule it early enough, then we can circulate and get more farmer attendance in that webinar. And the topic we discussed based on enthusiasm and amount of work that our team has done, biocontrol would be the best candidate for next year for this 2023 webinar. So I just want everyone's feedback at this point on the topic and date. Is biocontrol a good candidate for our upcoming webinar?
I think so.
Ash, is there a chance we could maybe have something on the survey work as well? Since we're going to be doing quite a lot of survey work directly after that.
Okay, so you mean some sort of a webinar or some discussion?
I think just we've seen data which was valuable yesterday. A few slides on that, and just making sure that growers or whoever attends the meeting, the webinar, is aware that there will be a survey upcoming, and making them aware that it's important that they answer that survey. I think it's just a timing thing.
Yes, that's definitely a good point, and we have done that in the past, where at the last slide we shared the link to to the surveys and requested them to fill those out, and we can definitely do that again. And basically, maybe at the end of webinar, also give Kay a couple minutes to emphasize the need and nature of the survey. Any other comments? It's a comment by Dale. Has webinar been done on using cultural controls? Yes, Dale. Cultural control is not part of this project, but it was part of the OREI projects, and we have done a lot of information in those OREI project webinars, and I'll be happy to share the links with you. Any other?
Ash, I might have missed it. Did you list other possibilities that we're kind of comparing the biocontrol with? I mean, I think based on discussions yesterday in general, when we talk about it at our meetings, biocontrol is still a very interesting topic for people. So I think there's some good reason to do it, but I'm just curious what might be also on your list, economics or insecticide resistance. We've already done, maybe we've done the resistance already, or yeah.
We have done sampling. That was the first one. And then we did, I think we have done cultural controls through OREI project. We have done behavioral control. And at this point, biocontrol seems to be a good candidate. And at the end, last year's 2024 webinar we'll do it during the no cost extension time, of course, at that time, but that will be summarizing all of the objectives. Basically, it will include the best management practices type, where it will have cultural, biological, chemical resistance management, and everything that was part of this project. That would be sort of a more concluding seminar for the project.
That makes sense.
Any other comments?
Ash, I always love biocontrol, and I think that is a great topic. My only concern is that how far out are we before this is something that growers would be able to have access to? And there's always that concern of having a webinar. People get really excited about something, but what if it's not something they can put into use for 5 or 7 years out? So that's my only concern. I think the research that's being done is great, but that is a concern as far as, are you going to get people all excited and then have them be disappointed because it's not something that they can start to implement soon?
That's excellent comment. And we have already started releasing in some states. I would like Kent to sort of comment here on the status of where we are and how soon it's going to be widely available.
Yeah, I think if you were to have a whole seminar on biocontrol, it would be good to go over things like the augmentation programs that people have tried throughout the world. Good results from Mexico, not such good results from the United States. To look at how the cultural practices that people were using impacted some of the soil-borne predators for the spotted wing in the soil. There's a lot more to biocontrol than the classic biocontrol. And the impact of insecticides. I think people are going to start to do some of that work, or behavioral chemicals on the natural enemies. So yeah, I think that if you broadened it away from just the classic biocontrol section, you certainly have got a lot of information that can be implemented. And hopefully, if this is in a year, at the end of next season, we'll have a lot more knowledge about how these natural enemies that we're importing and releasing are doing.
Yeah, just to add to Kent's point, we had a webinar on biocontrol in 2018 when we were working on identifying which organisms were going to be selected for potential permit requests. And like half of that was on assessing native biocontrols and identifying who was there already and what predators were present. And so I think, you know, all of that can be updated because there's been a lot more work since then. But I think, you know, the update on releases and now the detection and spread of Leptopolina, I think is a good like half of that, and then half of it can be on the other elements that take up that are incorporated in biocontrol.
That's an excellent idea. Any other comments? So as to Dale's question, you know, availability of parasitoids for implementation, you know, states that are part of this project have insectaries which have already started to rear those Gnaspis colonies, and depending on their availability and capacity to rear, at this point they can be released at commercial farms, right?
Yes, as long as it's a permitted state, and we're going to work on getting all the needed states permitted this spring. And I think that's something to explain to growers in the webinar, that Gnaspis will probably never be in an augmentation program like green lacewings. It's just too difficult to rear. So the implementation is just getting it to see if it can get established in your area and what its impact might be, or if Leptopolina is going to be the more common one in your area. And I still, you know, I agree with the group that a lot of the impact of classic biocontrol is still 3, 4, 5 years out before we know how good these things are going to do. And I've mentioned I'd be ecstatic at 20% mortality at the beginning of the season. That's about what we see in Asia. So that's about what you would expect. We've got some sites like Shin King was reporting, a couple of his sites in Delaware, he was getting over 70% parasitism, but you know, maybe at those sites he only had 10 spotted wing collected. So that data can be kind of difficult to interpret.
No, that's not true, Ken. No, that actually I will show you a little bit more details just in a few minutes here.
Yeah.
I'd just like to reemphasize to everyone that our expectation is that the classical biocontrol primarily will be useful at reducing the landscape populations around growers. So even if these agents are not agents that can be picked up and mass produced by commercial insectaries and purchased by growers for their own property, you know, we still expect them to have a role overall. They'll contribute to other management methods, everything working together.
Hey, I just wanted to add, or at least kind of come back to Delilah's question. In terms of getting from our insects to release, one of the constraints, of course, is the expense of rearing. And then also in areas that are kind of far away from our home places, it's a little hard to do the kind of follow-up that we want to do at most of these release sites. So sending out sentinel fruit or collecting fruit, measuring parasitism rates and identifying species. So I guess where I'm coming from a little bit is, do we want to get in a position where we send out wasps to get released, but don't do the follow-up? We could probably release in more sites, but then we don't get get the information we want. Because I can imagine I could send wasps down to Long Island, or I could send wasps in quite a ways away from where I am, but I wouldn't have the funding or the time to go out there and set up the sentinel fruit or collect the fruit and kind of do the kind of documentation that would be nice to have.
Didn't we talk about the central repository of where the wasps went and how many got released and when?
We did. Jana Lee maybe was going to kind of help coordinate, and that would be good, at least to have it recorded.
I think follow-up is going to be tough even for research groups, let alone private individuals.
Yeah.
So with the assumption that there may be varying qualities of data that go along into that repository, I think at the very least, when, where, and how many would be helpful.
And we do have a rough draft of a form where people would deposit that information on releases that me, XG, and Jana worked on. And I think I need to reinvigorate that effort and make sure that we get it done before the season starts again.
Hello, this is Greg Wiggins. I'm with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. I was curious as far as maybe doing the monitoring after releases, what level of involvement have any of you at the states incorporated with the county extensions or the extension service in general, using county agents possibly to collect the traps at different intervals, things like that, so that your lab staff doesn't have to do as much traveling? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. With just monitoring the flies is relatively easier, but when it comes to monitoring for these parasitoids, it's a bit more complicated. It's more involved process. So far, we have done in Georgia, we have done through the lab members directly. So we have not had that much commitment from county agents, at least until now.
I will say here in Maine, we have been going through some traps from last year that were sentry traps baited with we'll say a dowsing solution, and we were picking up leptoplina in our sentry traps. In terms of, they do go to some of our SWD lures, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure our county faculty are stretched pretty thin these days. And a lot of it, depending on the county, their specialty may be in cattle and forage production or 4-H. So I guess it would depend on the location for sure.
Yes.
And I could imagine in certain locations, if they could ship fruit, if they just did the fruit assays without the sentinel assays, which is really one of the more common protocols, I suppose they could ship those fruit if they did it next day, and the rearing could be done at a central location too, where a county agent would be helpful in that way, as long as they have some good protocols.
Actually, you might want to even go a level further, which is having the county agents recruit master gardeners who typically have more time and fewer responsibilities. And if they have an interest, then it's like they get a fruit sample. Oh, I know where a wild blackberry patch is. I can go get that. But the agents themselves are actually, pretty busy.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But I was just trying to think of what existing resources could be out there, and master gardeners are a good suggestion for something like that. If host fruit could be shipped to them and they could put it out in a timely manner and follow the protocols, specific ones trained on how to do this and everything. So yeah, I was just curious about that, so that maybe thinking along those lines wouldn't limit ourselves to getting these things out in the field just because we're worried about not being able to monitor them. Maybe try to think of who could help us monitor things like that.
Thanks, Greg. We have Dale.
I would second the idea of the master gardeners. I think another source is there's a lot of college students looking for internships these days. And I'm actually interviewing 3 different students from Williams College. They're not ag folks, but they're environmental studies students. So there may be some opportunities. There's a lot of farmers that are hiring interns, especially some of the smaller farms. And I know for me, the interns are not allowed to do more than 50% manual labor. They have to have an actual science-based project or some other aspect. So I think there may be some potential. I'm thinking right now that, I've probably got 2 or 3 Williams College students that would love to dive into a project like this for the summer. So there may be some opportunities that way if it's an easy type of thing to, if there is a centralized place that samples can get sent.
And Dale, how far are you from Greg Loeb?
Exactly 4 hours.
There you
Greg,
go.
have you ever done it in less than 4?
Not to your place. No.
Yeah. But we use overnight mail all the time. I mean, our weekly fruit samples for sampling inside our exclusion netting always go overnight mail to Greg's lab. So we've got that system worked out quite well.
So was the thinking on this to do it within the term of the project, or to try to extend the life of monitoring our results after this project is over?
Yeah. In my mind, I'm thinking of getting another funding source to help expand to other areas where I might release, you know what I mean? So, and I would see that going beyond the life of this project, but I first want to see if we even get much recovery with Ganaspis. And if that's the case, then it would be, I'd be interested in, getting it out to more places.
All right, Jimmy.
Just a question for Kent. I think Jane Lee's on the area-wide grant to release parasitoids across the West Coast and other places. I don't know if Southern California has been considered in this. I know you're working with Diego up in the Watsonville area, but down here in Oxnard, we have year-round production, and just wondering if that could be considered in future releases as well.
Yeah, we did some releases in conjunction with the Strawberry Board. They've got personnel based at Cal Poly. And so we released in a few areas. It's exactly as Greg described. We went down, we helped with the releases, but getting down there to do sampling afterwards was difficult. So we only went one time post release. And our hope is to work more closely with the farm advisors this year, especially Mark Bolda up in Salinas area, The farm advisor in the Stockton area where we got most of our cherries moved on to a commercial position. But yes, it is our plan to try to increase release sites across California. And of course, working closely with Diego, I know you're getting your own insectary going. And still waiting on permits from Mexico to send them the proper G1 Ganaspis as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jimmy and Ken. We have a comment from Angela Lavaro from New Jersey Department of Ag. Angela, you can unmute yourself and make your comment here that you just added in the chat.
Hello. I'm actually Alex, but we were sharing a link, so I came up as Angela.
This problem is common with this meeting. We have lots of Sarahs here.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Gillett. I'm one of the research scientists at the New Jersey Beneficial Insect Lab, or it's called the Philippa Lampe Beneficial Lab. Since you guys were talking about concerns about availability of GB, I was just throwing out kind of what our mode of doing things is. So we are very aware as a biocontrol lab that at the beginning of a project, we don't want to be just selling the agents to private people as soon as we can, because we don't want to interfere with any kind of research sites that are ongoing. We try to work, right now we're working with Cesar at Rutgers, but we're looking to expand on that in terms of distributing GB. Normally, right now we're on a cooperative agreement with the USDA to work on the mass rearing, to get that going, to provide to first in New Jersey and then to other entities. Usually with other projects, the course has been that we continue to do that until either like research has died down or there's been so many releases that it doesn't matter. And then we do tend to move toward making the agents available to the public eventually. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We do intend to do that with this project once, I guess, the consensus develops that we're not going to be interfering with anyone's release sites. But we feel like things are going generally well in terms of mass rearing. So just say hi.
Thank you. So, any other comments? All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, and that is actually biological control plans for this coming year. And I think Kim and Chen King are going to take over.
Yes, and Shin King will start, and then I'll follow him after a bit.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Let me share my screen first. Oh, sorry, it's no. Somehow my computer stacked. So,
The screen is not showing. It's I guess
yeah, somehow I could.
stop. Maybe unshare if you can.
Okay, let me unshare. Sorry.
And just stop sharing and then start sharing again.
Okay.
Yes, we can see now.
I can see it.
Yes, good.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. So we already discussed a lot about biocontrol. So for this section, I think this year we'll be still focused on the release. This is just a continuation of last year's releases. I know as a level of doing some side study like windowing this grade. And so also we have a lot of questions being raised yesterday. I think one also asking about, this walls were going to establish, where it come from. So I think maybe before I'm talking about our lease, maybe give you a little bit more background information. So that give you some kind of perspective of why AOJ is why the Spanish, where GB going to establish a lot. So we did some kind of modeling, and so I want to show you some results before I'm talking about what are we going to do. And then after that came where I updated some of the taxonomy of the G1, G3 we talked a lot bit before, and also some kind of long-term plan for this project and for installation. So let me start with show you very quickly some results. So this map showed the adventable establishment of the Lepidopteran japonica. I would just say AOGs in the US. And this is data based on everyone sent to me, based on last year's release and correction. As you see, this is the gray state where they everywhere released the GASPs last year. And the AOG was found everywhere except California. And I think a larger number was found in, in the middle Atlantic state like Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Also, good number was found in New York and Michigan, and also in Oregon and Washington State. So this is the current data. Was still, I would say it's incomplete because we are still waiting to confirm the specimen by barcoding. So maybe there's some mistake, but overall, it's looking like this AOG is already widely established in the US. This shows the recovery of the Gillespie's. I would just say G1. So this is a string was released in all the state in the gray state. So far, we recovered in Delaware, also was recovered in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and also in Oregon. But in Washington, it's already established. But the range seems expanding. Well, in Maine and Georgia, they found from this trap, century trap. And other states seem has been recovered here for the first year. So this is about the recovery. So I thought I wanted to show this picture may be important because a lot of people asking about, what about, whether the wasp is going to stage. So I thought maybe important to show you where they are collected from in East Asia in their native range. So basically, these pesticides are native to the East Asia, and mainly the China, Japan, and Korea. And here you see, the green dots show where the AOG was found, and the red dots show where GB was found. And then I have the mixed color. This is where both wasps are found. Actually, in a lot of different places, they are coexist. They are found from China, from Japan, and from South Korea. But what you see, the big pie that shows the proportion of these two pest toys. And I want to ensure, from our collection, not just our, a lot of different global, from the collection in East Asia, you can see actually the GB was always more abundant than the AOG from same area. That's why, Ken mentioned yesterday, I think he was saying, GB probably eventually will catch up. Although now we see the AOG is very dominant because we don't know when the AOG was established here. And we just started this GB. So just sort of give you some kind of hope, maybe when the AOG will catch up. But also I want to point out that, that actually we only surveyed a very, very limited area. Actually, before the SWD emerging as the pest, there's nothing known about these pest toys. And so there's still a lot of larger area have not been explored. So that's why there's not potential to improve this project. But also on the right side, the two map one show the establishment of both pest toys in Pacific Northwest in British Columbia and Washington State. There's also, give some something you can think, they can establish over there already. And also in Italy, they released the G1 1 year then only then as they started releasing in 2021, and they get the cover last year. That means the G1 is successfully established in northeast Italy. But also the AOG was established there since 2019. And then this is just show the G1, G3, that's very, very similar. I just want to point out that, the G1 is always more abundant than the G3, and they both also collect from a lot of different area. And the way we release, they all come from, originally from I have the star you see here, from the Tokyo area. That means, we are still release one stream. So they also have a lot of potential, Kim will touch a little bit about this, there's a lot of other population might be, even bad in terms of the climatic, adaptability, right? So there's a lot of potential for this project to improve. So this is basically all the record that I have collect. I'm trying to update into my database, try to collect all the record we know so far. So the top one showed the AOG record was about 220 record from North American, from Europe, and from East Asia. And GB has been recorded from 104 wind. And so based on what we know, their distribution in East Asia, this is what we predicted based on the habitat distribution, where this was coextension outside their native range. And if you look, this is on the US, you look at that likely, along the West Coast, and the larger area in the East Coast, and also in the Midwest, it seems a very good habitat for them. So that's just based on what we know from their native range to predict where they're likely to establish. I have to point out this is very preliminary, so I'm still playing around with the modeling, and this is also very conservative prediction because we don't know actually exactly where they distributed in the East area. We only have very limited survey, right? So, but at least to give you some idea, where this person could be established based on what we know they are recorded in East Asia. So now let me talk a little bit about what are we going to do. So I think a lot of people are asking about, talk about what's the impact of the PESA to make. And I think at this point, we actually mostly concerned about whether G1 is going to establish first. Or we really not concerned about how much impact it's going to make. I think it can talk about, at least 3-4 years, maybe we look at, whether some potential. So that's why, in Delaware, we mainly focus this in this non-copper areas where we think they are most likely going to establish. So like we did last year, we released in 2 state park near the New York area, and then Winstar just our backyard is. We are located at University of Delaware, so it's the UD farmland. So we released 3 times in July, August, September. We're going to do the same this year. And we totally released about 4,500 wasps in the 3 sites. We take about 100 samples and we sampled 12 different host plants and we processed over 11,000 fruits. So we probably will increase them in this size and probably will also, increase the sampling. But what we did last year give us some idea, what kind of host plant we're going to sample in this area. This is map show the temporal patterns of the wild fruit suitability in this area. So basically, this is our main plan we have here. Like in early June, the black mulberry is everywhere in the park here. It's very, very, very planted. But we didn't find the spotted wing Drosophila in June. Actually, we found flies in early July. And then we have those wild lupus. Those are the main host plant here. And then we have some later season fruit, like, we had like the pumpkinweed, like the autumn olive and honey. This is very abundant in this area, in those parks. And so we're going to continue to sample this fruit through the season from June until October. I want to just give you one one figure to show you the season dynamics of the spotted wing abundance and pelletism in our area. So basically, we found the spotted wing mainly from this fruit type fruit, mainly from the white lupus. The population picked up in July and then reached the peak in August. And then after this white lupus gone, the population seems crashed, and we don't find many spotted wing larvae in those later season fruit like honeysuckle, pumpkinweed, or autumn olive. And then also the pelletism, the pattern look very similar. So we get the highest pelletism in early August from this lupus, and the average about 40%. So I just can measure about pelletism. So the range is up to 80%. We collected over thousands fruit, and we collect a lot of flies also. But I was actually very surprised with this high pelletism. But later on, we also found the Maryland, they also, in some sites, they collect very high pelletism. So it seems like in this area, in the middle Atlantic States area, the AOG is nearly well established. So I think my impression is like habit match is the key. This is I was in South Korea last year to collect those pestoids, and I was very impressed. This habitat, some habitats look very similar to where we have here. We are mainly in Asia. We mainly collect this wasp from white lupus. They are planting along some at the edge of forest or along those sides. And so we mainly collect those wasps from those white lupus. But so far, there are totally about 33 different host plants that are associated with G1, and there's more host plants associated with the AOG. But the lupus are the main host plant so far. So what are we going to do this year? I think we will continue this, but also we will be happy to provide the parent colony for some state if they want to release. This is what we did last year. So this year, I think I should mention before, maybe South Carolina want to do this. So we will be happy to do our best to provide parent colony for you to need to release, And we ourselves, we will continue to release in the 3 states. We are coordinated partner with Katie Hembe from the University of Maryland, also Kathleen Damchuk and Kelly Riggin and David Bingo from Pennsylvania State University. So I'm going to I'm stop here. You can pick it, please.
Okay, thanks, Shin King. If you could unshare your screen, then I will share mine so that I can advance my slides. Okay, and let's see, I go to presentation mode, right? Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see.
I can see you.
Okay, I should be in presentation mode now.
Yeah.
Okay, as Kent and Shin King have mentioned already, we've been working with what we've been referring to different populations of Ganaspis brasiliensis as clades or biotypes or specific groups that we've been designating G1, G2, G3, and so on. And these distinctions have all been based on CO1 gene sequences. And CO1 gene sequence is often used as a marker to distinguish significant differences in gene populations. And this is a reasonable way to start out the project. However, as we collected more and more material and we had more and more specimens analyzed, as Kent mentioned, we've noticed that many of our sites had both G1 and G3 clades or groups together at the same place at the same time. And this gave us the first clue that this could be actually the result of hidden cryptic speciation, because something is keeping these groups separate in the same location and allowing them to persist so that they don't mix. But for several years, we're limited to using the G1 and G3 terminology. And Matt Buffington, the ARS systematic entomology lab specialist in fidgeted wasps, got involved in the project and has been looking at a lot of these specimens. And he's the one who produced this cladogram showing these different varieties, along with other workers that have submitted samples from around the world. And as Shin-Kang and Kent have both pointed out, the populations that we've been most interested in working with from spotted wing Drosophila are all the G1 and the G3 clade as we recognize them. Once we began to think that there could be cryptic species, though, we asked our colleague at Newark, Keith Hopper, who's a population geneticist, to get involved. And he created genome assemblies for specimens from several of the populations that we had brought in and had in culture. And this included 2 different populations that we had collected from Yunnan province in China, one of which had been classified as a G3 and one of which was classified as a G1 population, and 2 populations that we had obtained from cooperators that they had gotten from Japan, a G1 from Tokyo and a G3 from Nagano. So these were all different lineages. And he performed extensive analyses of these gene sequences and found substantial divergence between the populations. And he also looked at sequences from the adventive population of Ganaspis brasiliensis obtained from Paul Abram in Canada, that they had, based on the CO1 assay, identified as a G1 lineage. And he found that the amount of sequence divergence between all these different lineages suggests that they really are different species, confirming the suspicions that have been growing that we had cryptic species present in this among these populations. And it's still a little bit unclear which clade the Canadian material is. It looks like a G1, as mentioned, based on the CO1, but it has similarities with the G3 based on the more detailed full gene sequence. And this suggests again that the G1, G2, G3 nomenclature is actually doesn't really fully represent all of the complexity that we find in this genus. So this work is going to be ongoing. I'll mention a bit more of that in a moment. At Newark, we've conducted mating crosses in the laboratory to look for reproductive compatibility between the G3 lineage from Yunnan, China, which we had collected and we've been maintaining in our lab, and the G1 lineage from Tokyo, Japan, which is the one that we've obtained from cooperators and is the one that is being mass reared and released around the country now. And a little bit before our crossing studies, another team of researchers at CABI, led by Luca Seehausen, also crossed the G1 Tokyo population with populations that they had obtained from Nagano. And they found that these populations did not cross, they would not produce any female progeny. And this led them to suspect that there were different species involved. And when Shin-Kang and our team at Newark concluded their studies, they found similar results with our crosses between the G1 and the G3. And I'll show that in just a moment. But these combined lines of evidence, the lack of reproductive crosses between these, what we had been thinking of as the G1 and the G3 populations, and the differences in the gene sequencing between these lineages, strongly supports the idea that they really are different species. This is just a diagram of the crossing results from the Newark studies. And the important thing I want to point out here is the chart in the upper left-hand corner, which shows the proportion of females that were produced. And in the little oval there, you can see that the crosses between the G1 and the G3 in both directions, G1 female and G3 male, and the inverse, neither one of those crosses produced any female progeny. They did, however, produce male progeny, and there was some parasitism, which you can see in the other charts in this graph. But the important thing for the species identity here is that they produce no females, so they really are isolated. Whoops, I went too far here. Go back. So we have ongoing genetic and taxonomic studies of Ganaspis and Leptopolina. I mentioned that Matt Buffington is involved, and he's now sequencing a much wider range of Ganaspis specimens obtained from our studies across the country in Canada, and he's preparing a taxonomic revision, and he will soon have a new name for us to apply to the G1 strain. So it will no longer at some point, it won't be Ganaspis brasiliensis or Near brasiliensis, but we'll have some other name, and we don't know what that is at this point. But hopefully we will have this information before too much longer, and before the year is out, I think Matt has suggested. And Matt is also working to identify morphological characters. Now that he's confident that these are two different species, he can look in greater detail for minute characters that actually can be used to separate the two species microscopically, and this could be very useful for making identifications without having to subject them to genetic analysis. It's also likely that his genetic studies will show that there are other interesting differences among these clades that might be associated with important biological and ecological differences. And these differences could be very important for our project because they could be associated with climatic suitability, for example. And both Shin Kang and Kent pointed out that most of our collections in Asia, even though we did visit quite a number of different locations, there's still many, many other places that we could look. And we had hoped to go back to some of these locations in Asia and recollect over the past couple of years, but we were deterred by the inability to travel during COVID. And now that things are opening up again, we'll have some opportunity to make revisits to Asia and try to obtain more material. And then Tara Garpy with Ag Canada is also enlisted in the project, and she's going to be barcoding samples from cooperators around North America of Leptopolina japonica, so that we'll be able to determine whether or not there's important variation among the Leptopolina populations that can then be used to conduct more detailed genetic studies. And this kind of information is often helpful in identifying where an invasive population comes from in the native range. And finally, just to reiterate, as Kent mentioned yesterday, and Shin Kang mentioned again today, Ganaspis recoveries so far from our releases have been limited at a number of the sites, although we do have good recoveries and good signs of establishment in several areas. And these limited recoveries could simply be a matter of the fact that not large numbers have been put out yet. And it takes a couple years of releases to be confident that something is established, and it takes time for the populations to spread and increase in the field. But it might also mean that the Ganaspis colony has been in the lab for a bit long and it's become somewhat lab adapted. So we will work to refresh our colonies this year with field collected material and see if we can't spruce up the efficacy of the colonies. And again, we hope to make repeat visits to Asia to obtain fresh material, looking particularly for populations that might be better suited for some of the other climates in the US where we don't have establishment yet. And then finally, I just wanted to mention again that we should also continue these kinds of studies with Leptopolina japonica now that it's become widely established in North America. And that's all I have. So if you have any questions for Shinkang or Kent or myself, I'd be glad to take those if there's time at this point.
If we don't have questions, let's move on to 3.2. Cesar is back with us now. Cesar, you can take it over. I guess Steve has a question.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about rearing Leptopolina japonica. Is it easier to rear than Ganaspis brasiliensis, the G1 strain? Because we're anticipating, I mean, based on our results last year, we're anticipating that we should be able to collect Leptopolina japonica from the wild. And I'm just wondering if that, logistically, if that's easier to rear than a GB.
Yeah, it can be reared on melanogaster. So, Shinkang?
So you go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I think it's much easier to rear, and it can be reared on melanogaster, which is easier to rear.
Can it be reared on diet? Or does it still prefer fruit?
It can be reared in diet.
Yeah, that seems like a big win for rearing in my mind.
Yeah.
Certainly makes things easier.
Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, I mean, we're just sort of thinking forward for like future planned releases that we might have. I mean, that's a big benefit to be able to rear it on diet.
Remember, you've got to get a permit from each state to re-release Leptopolina because it's not permitted, and you would not be allowed to release it across state lines.
Right.
You need a permit within state if you collect it within your state from when it's already established?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the official rule.
Yeah, this depends on the states. I mean, some states are very flexible about that. Some states, well, states have different processes for allowing re-releases and redistributions, but APHIS has no jurisdiction over that, so it's a state matter.
Yeah, the Washington State Department of Ag said we do not regulate that.
Ken, could you comment on the status in California with Leptopolina? Was it discovered in the wild, and is there a permit pending, or?
No, we have not yet found it in California. And it could be that it's going to be here eventually, but it was just found in Oregon this last year. And so it's moving south.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Cesar, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Let's see. Let me know when you can see my slides.
We can see your slides. You can just put in a presentation mode and
there we go.
Good to go.
Okay. So yesterday I talked about the goals of the behavioral control sub-objective. So just to remind you, this is to evaluate existing behavior-based strategies to manage spotted wing Drosophila, and also we're working towards the development of novel behavior-based strategies. So for the first goal, we, as I mentioned before, Von Walton and his group at Oregon State, they are continuing working towards with the food grade gum or decoy. I know that there's interest in from different, as Jimmy mentioned, from different groups to use them. Right now, the availability is limited on the number of states that can use them, but that's something that Vaughn and his group have been working on. We are working with SCRI with towards the registration of ACTRA SWD. That's something that is again pending. We are not envisioning any more experiments. I think we have done a lot of work on both HOOK and ACTRA that have been funded by this grant and also sponsored by IR4, and we feel like there's no need to continue testing the ACTRA until it's registered. So what we are working on now is on the Combi Protect. So I mentioned this is a new product that is being sold by Andermatt USA. Is based on a company in UK. The person that discovered the technology is German, but UK Andermatt is the one that is commercializing it. And this product, just to remind you, is a phagostimulant. Contains phagostimulants. So it's just a mix of plant extracts, sugars, and proteins. And you mix it with an insecticide, and you can apply it to your crop with any regular sprays. So in the past 2 years, I showed you the data yesterday. We have been testing Combi Protect in research farms, and the product, the formulation that was available to us was a liquid formulation. And now the company is moving towards dry formulation. So this is because of better storage and also shipment, like to move it from place to place is easier with a dry formulation. Also, I heard that there were some issues like mixing the liquid formulation with insecticide. So this will be hopefully easier to mix. So because of that, so far we have collected data only on the liquid formulation. So our plan is to conduct the studies in the laboratory just to see whether the liquid and the dry formulation perform equally well. So that's something that we are leading just to get some sense of, do we get equal efficacy with both formulations when mixed with different insecticides. So the plan is to conduct just assays in the lab where we treat fruit with these insecticides with and without the Combi Protect, and expose with either the liquid or the dry formulation, and then expose flies to treated fruit and see, look at mortality, oviposition, and oviposition and an emergence of adults. So that's something that we are planning on doing soon, hopefully before the field season starts. The other protocol that we have is to conduct trials in commercial farms. This is dependent on the registration of this product. I mentioned yesterday that Andermatt is having a harder time than they thought with the registration across the US. And we are now working with IR4 towards this goal. Like, we're hoping to have the registration hopefully soon. Our field season is starting soon, so So that's kind of pressing at this point. The idea is to test some of the same treatments that we tested at the research farms, but in commercial farms. The limitation with working in a commercial farm is that the growers have low tolerance for SWD, and is a high risk if the treatment doesn't work. So we are reducing the number of treatments to just a standard control program, which is the program that the grower uses. So with the high label rates, the standard program with this, we might see if we can add with only the half rate. So this definitely, like for example, in New Jersey, we're going to include the standard, the higher rate, because that's the standard that they use. The half rate or the lower rate, that's if possible, but in New Jersey, that's too risky for the grower to do. And we're going to also have a treatment with the standard control with the Combi Protect. So this is just the higher rate. So this treatment here plus the Combi Protect, and also a standard program that has the lower rate with the Combi Protect. So those are the treatments that that we're planning on doing. And the second goal of our objective is to develop novel behavior-based strategies to manage spotted wing Drosophila. And one of our goals, as I mentioned also yesterday, is to we're searching for new repellents, and not just identifying new repellents, but also working towards making them more effective under field conditions. So looking at different formulations and methods of deployment. So that's something that is being led, even though there's different labs within our group that are looking for new repellents. Greg Loeb's group in Cornell has been leading in this objective, working with identifying the 2-pentyl-furan that I mentioned yesterday. So they have been testing different ways of different formulations and methods of deployment. They have tried earlier on with those bags that I show you yesterday in one of the pictures. They recently tried puffers, but those have not been very effective. So now they are working with a company with looking at spirals for deploying the 2-pentyl-furan. So they are also looking at location of application. So they are finding that, which is kind of interesting, that if they apply to the ground, they apply these repellents to the ground, it seems like to be effective also. So they are comparing the ground versus canopy applications. And one of the things that we are all interested, that people that were working with repellents, is how they work. That's kind of an area that we're not very clear on what's the mechanism of these repellents. So that's something that we're going to be looking into. And you just heard about the talk about biological control. Everything that we are trying to do is make sure that these strategies are compatible with each other, like if we're going to deploy them in the field. So we want to make sure that if we use things like behavioral control, they're going to be compatible with biological control. So we want to see whether ACTRA, the Combi Protect, and also the repellents are compatible with the 2 biological control agents, Ganaspis brasiliensis and Leptospirina japonica. So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to take any questions or any comments, any advice. Jimmy.
Hey, Cesar, thanks for that. And sorry I missed your presentation yesterday. Maybe you mentioned it with Combi Protect. You know, I think the original intent from Uwe, who developed this product out of Germany, was to use as a bait spray and be able to get through the field really fast with, you know, coarse droplets and spraying, you know, at low volume. So curious how you're thinking about that now, and if there's any opportunity to look at that moving forward as a kind of bait spray option.
So we met with Uwe several times in the past, and he expressed that same interest. They claim that they have data that showing that it works as a bait spray, but we are hesitant to use it as a bait right now because we would like to get our some data showing that it actually works. So so that's why we started just as an adjuvant, using it as an adjuvant, just to adding it to the insecticide to see whether we see any benefit. But we last year we initiated some studies looking at least, you know, in the laboratory right now, looking at whether reduced volume of a spray could have any effect on the fly's survival, and it looks like it does. So we were intrigued because this product doesn't have any attractants. So so it relies on the flies to find it. And if you're using very low volumes, like they want to like reduce it to like 95%, I think, of the volume that you use, which to a grower is going to be very hard to actually apply. You have you need like special nozzles, and so I don't know, you know, how whether that's feasible, but regardless, we were wondering if that level of application would make any had any effect. We have done also some studies. We are working with Ash's group, looking at behavioral, like doing no choice and choice tests with a Combi Protect with and without insecticides. And Combi Protect doesn't attract them. There's no attraction. So, and makes sense because it doesn't have any attractant. And we asked Uwe why he doesn't want to put any attractant. And he's told us that the reason is because he thinks that the product will fail with an attractant. That he thinks that with an attractant, we will just attract the flies, and they might be more damage to the crop that way.
Isn't that the basis of attract and kill?
That's what I think too. But I feel like we're not pursuing that after the experience that we're getting with the ACTRA. So we stopped pushing for that because the adding a semiochemical, like adding an attractant, is going to cause more issues with the registration. So at this point, I'm like, let's just find out whether we can get this product registered, and then figure out whether, you know, maybe we add an attractant. But the company is not interested at all in adding an attractant.
So, Jimmy, the cherry growers have a long history of using bait sprays because of GM 120. And when we went to them with the idea of, oh, there's this new adjuvant, and they were like, oh hum. And yet when we said, oh, a possible bait spray for spotted wing, they went, do that. So that's what we've been pursuing, whether it makes sense based on this material's properties or not, because that's what our growers want, is they want a GF120 that works on spotted wing. So we're pursuing, at least in cherries, we're pursuing the bait option, not in blueberries.
But Betsy, the GF120 has an attractant. It's not just a phagostimulant. So that's kind of like where I was like, wondering, because we use GF120 also for blueberry maggot. My predecessor used it, and the growers were not that keen on it because it would create kind of like residue on the fruit.
Yeah, I think in cherries, which they have these really big droopy leaves. Usually the leaf would intercept the bait spray, and you didn't get much on the fruit. So it wasn't so much of a problem for us. If you have really exposed fruit clusters, I can see how you might get one of those little bait droplets on it.
Yeah, the grower didn't like it at all. So that's where we stopped, because back then when I started in 2005, that was something that we started testing for blueberry maggot, and but the grower said no, he didn't like it at all because it would leave residue. But it wasn't very effective against blueberry maggot because the attractiveness was not. It was also like whether the blueberry maggot will find the droplets that would feed on it.
Yeah, they tried it on apple maggot, and I talked to Art Aniello once, and he was like, "Yeah, well, it didn't really work all that well." Whereas in cherries, it really caught on. It seemed to work really well against cherry fruit fly, and you can just fly through those orchards.
Yeah, we tried Combi Protec for 2 years, here in screen houses, so small scale, and compared it to full cover sprays. We used spinosad, and it worked as well as the full cover spray. And then we also had an untreated, and the untreated did have higher counts of infestation, larval infestation. So we
as a bait? You used
as a bait, yeah, as a bait. So as they recommended. So we got the special nozzle. They shipped it with the product. We just screwed that on to our little backpack sprayer, and it worked pretty well. And then we even tried it. So that was in the fruiting zone to do the bait spray onto the fruit, but we wanted to see, could it also go away from the fruit and just bait spray on the bottom of the raspberry canopy. And we got good results from that. It's all preliminary, and single replicates with like 8 samples of 8 samples of 50 fruit every week. But yeah, so we tried it a couple times and it seemed to hold up as a bait spray.
But do you think the screen house was a big part of the success?
The screen house, well, we inoculated with flies in there, and we're able to control in a way the population, make sure there's steady population. Yeah.
And that's kind of my concern too, because I have been in Europe in some of the raspberry where they grow raspberries, and it was all in high tunnels. So I think moving from high tunnels or control environments where you have limited movement of flies to a large scale farm fields. There's Greg's group.
Yeah, thanks. Some of the things that Jimmy was just talking about, spraying it away from the actual fruit. I wanted to mention some work we've been doing on below canopy sprays of insecticide. We're not adding an attractant, but we're just spraying on below canopy and getting pretty similar control from compared to spraying an insecticide on the canopy, especially if we're doing, then this is in fall raspberry, so we have extremely high pressure, and we're seeing some efficacy. So it makes me wonder, one, the flies are spending time down there. We think we're getting adults rather than the large larvae. We don't know that for sure, but I think that's what's dying. And so adding somewhat tractant below canopy makes sense to me, that would bring the flies are down there anyhow, maybe.
Yeah. I think these are kind of the steps that we are taking as a group, and we discussed this quite a bit among us, is to like just prove that it does something first, and that there's some kind of benefit, and then work with the company towards registration, which is kind of like, to me, critical. And then I start to like look into other ways of applications, like, because if this is going to be used by the grower more immediately, it's going to be used as a full cover kind of application, as an adjuvant. But if we, in the meantime, we can start looking into whether bait sprays, because that's what we want. Ultimately, we want to reduce the amount of insecticide being applied. So, and that's what the bait spray would do. But we need to make sure that if we're going to recommend something like that to a grower, that it actually works. I think the grower is going to be feeling more comfortable if it just adds something to an insecticide to make it more effective. And actually, like, I gave this talk, like I presented some of our data to a grower meeting last week, and they were really excited about this idea of making an insecticide more effective, or if it works. The question is going to be like the cost. Does it is it going to be profitable, like to add more, to pay for this extra, if it's something, like 1% or 2%, whatever increase in efficacy it is.
Do your growers ever just add sugar to the tank to try to make it more effective?
No. I know in some states, I think, Greg, do some of the growers in New York, I think they did, no?
Yeah, and I think some are still like with a sale, some of the less potent materials based on that data that we did with Rich Coles, even though it's been inconsistent with different insecticides, but I think a few growers are still doing that, but I don't know how extensive.
A few growers do it here exactly the same with a sale in Maine. I've been interested to do the comparison between just sugar and Combri Protect. There was a lot of data out of the UK where they were just looking at corn syrup versus Combri Protect from Michelle Fountain's group, and they found comparable results between the two, but might be a pretty big difference in price between the two.
Indeed.
Something to consider.
There's a little bit of work out of Wageningen, where they looked at the residual activity of pesticides when they combined with Combri Protect, and it seemed to extend the residual activity. Don't ask me how it would do that, but I'm not sure if that work's published, but I heard a talk about that.
Jimmy, wait, I presented data yesterday, and you missed the talk, but our data also shows an improvement, especially in the residues. So especially when you reduce the rate, it is showing that in some insecticides, not all of them, like Delegate, Imidine, they show not much on with malathion, but and this was repeated in Georgia and New Jersey, and it was like the data was very, very similar.
Cool, interesting.
Yeah. And that's exactly what our growers want. Like they want this, the insecticides to last longer. So they can add something that to make sure that, you know, the efficacy remains high for longer time. I think that would be good.
Unless it screws up your MRL.
Betsy, I heard a lot of growers in Washington use either corn syrup or some kind of sugar with sprays in, at least in blueberries. Do you know if they're still doing that, or?
That was my understanding, but I obviously I don't know the blueberry growers the same as I do the cherry guys. But yeah, the blueberry growers are under a little more pressure, and I think they were looking for anything that might boost the activity of the insecticide.
At one point, it was what's the gentleman from Washington? He was part of our board as well.
Alan Schreiber.
Alan, he came to our meeting and he presented some of his trials with, that was pretty high rate of sugar that he added.
Yeah, yeah, the percentage was really high. Like at some point it's not cheap anymore.
Yeah, we tried those percentages and did not go well. It was almost to the point where it was sticky.
Our growers, when I presented that data, when I was working with Greg and Rich Coles, I presented that data, and they were very hesitant. They were not really into mixing sugars with insecticide, and they were always asking me, like, you know, what is going to happen with the bees? What, like, there's no bees there, but they were like really concerned about the non-targets. Like, what else are we going to kill if we add sugars? That was a big concern to them. Like, so just the idea of adding the sugar made them concerned. But when I talk about Combi Protect, it doesn't. So I don't know. It's
well, has Fountain's group ever looked at non-target effects?
I don't think they have.
Is this for?
I mean, that's part of our goal, but I don't think they have.
I know there was one trial done in Germany, mostly because I translated it from German, looking at Combi Protect in bees and in grapes, and they didn't find any effects.
What about parasitic Hymenoptera?
Not tested. So yeah, it's important that we test that.
We're going to great lengths to release them, so yes, by all means.
Yeah.
Cesar, now that it's been brought up, are those studies to look at impact on beneficials? Are those part of our plans for this objective?
Yeah, I mentioned at the end, yes, we're going to be looking at ACTRA, Combi Protect, and Greg's group is going to be looking at the rebalance and their effect on Ganaspis and Leptobalina behavior and mortality. So that's our plan, definitely, to see how compatible behavioral control and biological control are. So so that's where we are. Like, I haven't seen, there was another product, Ash, that you mentioned, remember? I tried like to contact the company and they never responded, and I couldn't find any information about that product.
Yeah, that was also from UK. I guess Michelle mentioned at the ESA in Vancouver that there was another product that somebody developed out of UK, and it was much more economical as compared to the ones that we currently have. And then you never got anything back from them?
Nothing, no. And it's an international phone number. I can try again, but there's no information about it on the internet. like Combi Protect, we found out because of, Michelle's group's work,
Right.
that came out in 2020, and I contacted the company right away, and they were really like, they answered to me right away, because they were trying to introduce the product in the US. But this company, I'm having a hard time like getting a hold of anybody there, but I'll see. I mean, those are kind of like the products so far that we have been testing, that have shown the most promise. I mean, the concern moving forward, and we have Iska on the call, is how EPA regulates these semiochemicals or attractants for insect pest control, and it's concerning because we work with companies for years on developing a product, and then EPA is having a lot of I don't know, it's putting a lot of restrictions, limitations on how to move forward with the registration. These compounds are, plant-based natural products, but just because they are not your normal lab pheromones, they how they are categorized is different. So that has been Alicia, you have a question?
No, I can comment on the Combi Protect. My understanding is that the EPA said that it is recognized as a pesticide, exempt from a tolerance because it has all food ingredients, but the formulation does not meet the minimum risk requirements because the ingredients, not all the ingredients are on the list of ingredients that are recognized by the EPA as minimum risk approved. You see what I'm saying? So basically the EPA is fine. It says we don't need a tolerance for this product. However, the states are freaking out because they are not used to handle products that are not meeting the minimum risk requirements. Can you see what I'm saying? So I know that the company reached out to a variety of states, and some came back and said, oh yeah, register as an adjuvant, or some other came back and said, oh yeah, the product is totally fine, maybe you need to amend the label a little bit. Others did not know how to really approach this kind of situation. That's why it's such a product out there, and it's not a problem with the formulation itself. It's just because there is a lack of laws and regulation when it comes to products, pesticides that are exempt from a tolerance, but at the same time, they do not meet the minimum risk requirements. I hope that explains it.
So Alicia, I know that the company, I mean, I wrote the letter of support. It has approached IR4. Like, how are they moving forward with it? Like, how is IR4 facilitating the registration?
We still have to figure it out. The reasons why, so the Andermatt doesn't really know how to approach the situation, and they reach out to us for assistance. And we don't have a path yet. In order to figure out how to proceed, IR4 has to dedicate resources. And since we are a federally funded organization, that request that you submitted has to be approved first. So once the request is approved internally, then hopefully IR4 will be able to step in and help a little bit. The issue with Andermatt is that they have a very, very limited amount of funds to push the project forward and pursue registration. So they are having, or they are seeing more problems with registering the products that they anticipated. So they're starting to wonder, is it even convenient for us to register in the US? So they reach out to us, and we are going to hopefully be able to help with the registration process, but it's tricky because of there's a lack of rules and regulation at the state level that is homogeneous across the US.
And that's the same thing that we are doing at ISCA Technologies. We are selling attract and kill products in Brazil, in Argentina, all over South America, in the Middle East, and we are not selling in the US. So it's just like EPA is not being able to understand that, I don't know, like some of our products, we are using 0.4 grams of AI per hectare of this crazy compounds that are found in pizza and Twinkles, whatever, and they prefer that people spray benzoate or whatever in the fields than these products that we have. We try to approach EPA and figure out how to manage it. It's very, very difficult. They have a book of rules, and they use that book of rules. They don't think out of that. So it's a very difficult process.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, we work with other countries where they are more receptive to attract and kill formulations.
As Ajnor said, to kind of recap this, it seems that EPA has drawn the line on if it has an attractant, and then the intent is to control a pest, they want to regulate it. And unfortunately, the ingredients that we have are things that the EPA is unfamiliar with. In other words, they haven't seen, even though they are flavoring agents or things that are seen in food or fragrances that are approved in those spaces, they haven't seen them yet, and they want to see them, which then brings into question the amount of money you have to then invest to get it approved, because there are ingredients they haven't seen as an inert, or they're ingredients that they haven't seen as an active. So it's just an additional hurdle that we're looking to find the right path through right now. And for our particular product, they've actually come back, and the lead ingredient that we have is the active. They've come back and they're asking, provide us more information so that we can determine that it's a biological. And it's okay, now I've got to go through, we have to go through another hoop before they will even meet with us to talk about the regulatory path. So we're kind of scratching our heads too, but we're working through the process. And I'm glad that I've got Cesar standing next to me as we go through this.
Yeah, it's just like it's something that can take is going to take years, and hopefully by then we have other solutions for SWD.
With EPA, we're basically where mating disruption was 40 years ago. That's where we are with them on these types of volatiles. It's going to take many years to have them recognized, and funding from companies that have the resources. We're not talking about Andermatt or those people, just that type of company, even my company, we don't have that kind of funding. We can't do it. It's impossible.
Yeah, EPA is locked on the late 70s with this semiochemicals. They understand semiochemicals as straight chain Lepidoptera pheromones and maybe a couple of other pheromones that pass through their scrutiny, but not much more than that.
And to that point, we actually approached them to talk about how do we go in and look at this broader semiochemical class, and then get some things, get regulatory relief on these things like they did with straight chain Lepidoptera pheromones. But the pushback that we received was, well, we haven't seen much information yet. And I was looking for, what do we need to provide for a classification for you to become comfortable. So it seems like it's a bit of the cart before the horse or chicken and the egg, where I wanted to go directly to classification regulatory relief, and they want to go ahead and see individual products first, then become comfortable. And then I think that's back to what people were saying. That could take years, if not longer. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm just trying to be realistic.
I think you're very realistic, Anderson. Sorry to say.
Yeah. It's just like, to me, it gets frustrating, like to work with, with ISCA for many years already, with the hook and then the ACTRA, and seeing what all the issues that have been raised through the registration process, and now with Andermatt, seeing the same situation where for small companies, as Alicia said, like for a small company, it's like you start wondering, is it worth it when they have a market somewhere else?
But Cesar, you should be happy that solutions that you're developing here in the US are being used for growers in other countries. So
we should tell that to the USDA SCRI.
Yeah.
Our work is being applied to Mexico, and
Technology is diffusing too far away from us, but not near us.
but you're contributing to science, you're contributing to a better world elsewhere.
So
Thanks to EPA.
Juan, is your product has the same status in terms of registration, or is any different with the EPA?
I don't know if you can call it registration. It's a minimum risk insecticide. It's classified as a minimum risk insecticide, which means it's not regulated by EPA. We had to reformulate it so that it fell into that. We had to change some of the ingredients so that it falls within that classification. And then what you need to do is you need to go to each of the respective states and make sure that, and they're very similar. It doesn't matter which state you are. They all use the lists of ingredients from EPA, and generally speaking, they should, if one state approves it, the majority of all US states should approve it, with exceptions.
What is it again, Bon? How do you call it?
A minimum risk insecticide. Same as what Andermatt is trying to do, but it sounds as if they have an ingredient in there that's not on their list of exempt ingredients.
Correct. So they're tolerance exempt by the EPA, but they don't meet the minimum risk requirements. Okay. So it's a more complicated position than Bond's technology, because they are minimum risk approved, but Combi Protect is not, because of the ingredients.
And then just speaking from a corporate vantage point, if you go the minimum risk route, you basically have to list all the ingredients, which you're basically giving away your formula, which is, part of the reason you're in business is to protect that,
Wow. Yeah, so that was one of the biggest hurdles for us, was because we had to list the ingredients and we did not want to do that initially. Yeah, that's difficult.
Wow.
We want to be philanthropic, but not that philanthropic.
Yeah. Wow.
So is this the case with the Combi Protect's new formulation or the old one?
It's with the new formulation.
It has the same, yeah, it's the same ingredients, I think. It's just a different way to package it.
So that's a good point. I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that the powder formulation was created for the reasons of better storage. However, all the ingredients are all from food. So that's why the EPA granted the tolerance exemption.
So Alicia, what's going to happen with our plans for this summer though? Like this is really affecting, you know, I have to meet with a grower like in the next couple of weeks to plan our summer trial.
I asked this question to Andermatt, and the regulatory expert they have on the team said that there shouldn't be any issues with testing. Crop distract is not a requirement because again, it's recognized by the EPA as food material that is tolerance exempt. So you should be able to run the trial as we agreed at the beginning of the year.
Oh, good.
Without any limitations, yes.
No limitation, like there's no like acreage, like limited amount of acreage that we need to test.
Not to my understanding at this point in time.
Okay.
Any other comments or discussion on behavioral control part of the work? If not, I guess we can move on to the general comments from stakeholders at this point. This is your last opportunity to give us feedback on any of the work that you have seen in the reports yesterday and plans today. Would appreciate your feedback at this time. Any comments, questions, feedback on any aspect of the project? Again, that was very.
I have.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that yesterday I discussed that we were using a sale as part of the program, and I forgot to mention when I said that that's in addition to another insecticide during that 2 to 4 week period at high SWD numbers or weather, real rainy times. Thank you.
So is that just a sale itself and another spray separate times, or is it a sale mixed with another insecticides and just one spray?
One spray, one spray together, and usually with a fungicide or something else. But we're doing both so that we can get the sale into the berry, and the first instar can't live through that. And what the other thing is that we can do that. We can get more than 7 days out of it sometimes. And I believe that you can do it every other spray on moderate to high condition. But just having the sale gives you that little extra help that we need in the Northeast, because we can get a week of rain or 2 weeks of rain, and very similar down south. And I got this tip from a North Carolina blackberry grower.
Thanks, Nate. Any other comments or questions?
Hey, Ash, this is Greg. I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but and it's kind of a long ways off, but I assume we're still thinking of meeting in person for our advisory meeting next year. Is that, have we talked about that rather than doing that remote? Because there's some advantages to meeting in person, especially in terms of the kinds of interactions you might be able to have with an advisory board if they're able to participate in person.
Yes, that is in the plans, and I guess we'll roll this idea out to all advisory board members soon, so we can, allow them enough time to plan. But yes, that will be our last annual stakeholder advisory board meeting as well, and I would definitely prefer to do that in person. Any comments or suggestions for the in-person meeting by members on the board right now? Would you be comfortable attending the meeting in person? It'll be about the same as sometimes in February the next year. Maybe earlier than this, first week of February or second, depending on other meetings in different regions.
I would just say to get that date set as soon as possible and let us know. Because we have a lot of other things we do during the winter time as well, including vacations. And just make it a place that's easy to get to.
Will do. Thank you.
And hybrid is a nice approach as well, where there's still an option to call in for those that can't make it in person.
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions? All right. Well, thank you again very much, especially thanks to all of our stakeholder advisory board members for joining us yesterday and today, and those who were able to, stay on until now. Yes, I know staring at computers is not easy job. These Zoom meetings can be very taxing, but thank you. I would really appreciate your commitment to the project and your interest in the work that we do as a team. And we will indeed take your comments and suggestions into the account that were presented at this meeting. And again, this does not close that channel. Anytime you have comment, suggestion, question, please feel free to reach the myself or any of the team members that may be in your states or region. So we really appreciate your input at any time. And at this point, Kent mentioned one thing that was related to team that I wanted to bring up. There was an extension award, National Extension Award. Kent, are you on? Kent is on.
Yeah, but you can describe it.
Yeah, so basically there is a National Team Excellence in Extension Award that is presented by ECOP, which is Extension Committee on Organization and Policy. It's basically your extension, it's a committee of your extension deans from each of the land grant institutions that presents this award. And Kent suggested, based on our nature of the work that we do, the way we are organized, the kind of outputs we have, we would be very, very competitive for this award nationally. So suggestion was made by Kent to submit nomination. And since then, there were a couple of suggestions to do maybe multiple nominations from multiple states, because each state can put up one nomination in this category. There will be some local competition within each state or institution. And at this point, I would like you, number one, should we go for it as a team member? You should let us know. And if you approved, yes, we are good to go, then how should we approach it? Should we just put up one nomination or two nominations or 10 nominations from participating states? What would be the best approach in your opinion? Floor is open.
We reach out to the awards committee to see what they feel like would be the best approach. If they would think that multiple nominations from multiple states would review better than just a single nomination.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the most sense to me, and then have it submitted based out of Georgia, because right now that's where the SCRI project's based out of, and everyone gets to say they got the award. And that way it's a fairly simple form. we could all just add a paragraph of what we've been doing, and it would be very impressive. Plus, Kay's work is something that would definitely be highlighted because she's looking at impacts. And so we've got that where most projects don't have something like that.
Okay, so here's the deal, Kent. I can contact, there's a person actually listed on their website as a contact person for this award. I can contact that person and see what their suggestion, advice is regarding that. Or have they seen anything like this in the past where multi-regional team was nominated from multiple states or not? Or whether it's a good idea or not. So
yeah, and there are 3 different awards. The one I had suggested was the team award, which had requirements like they need to have somebody who's in cooperative extension, and it's best to have more than one state. So they're thinking of just, 2 states, and here we've got 19 states or something like that.
So that would be nice. So, and also, I guess if we go, let me get in touch with that person and see what they say. And then we can, I guess, communicate through email and develop a strategy. So any other comments or suggestions? If not, I guess I take silence as an agreement.
I just want to close out by saying how honored I am to work with this group. You truly embody the land grant mission in the work that you've done, and I'm just very pleased and honored, and you make my life as an evaluator super easy. So thank you.
Back to you. Okay, we have worked with this is our 3rd SCRI, and we have a third OREI on the other end, and we have you are the best evaluator we have ever had.
Well,
your reports are like more than 100 pages each, so that's extensive work, and we like that. And we definitely will continue to work with you on this survey and get that national impact of all of the work that has been done over the years, ever since SWD was first detected in the US. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and y'all have a great afternoon.
You too. And at this point, I guess I would like to thank everyone, all of the team members, grad students, postdoc, research associates, and of course, advisory board members who have been part of this project. And we really appreciate your contributions at every level. And thank you all for all you do. It all makes us look good as a team. And we look forward to continuing to work with all of you as we go. So thank you, and you all have a good rest of the day and rest of the year, and we'll all see you at the advisory board meeting next year, most likely in person.
Thanks, Ash.
Thank you, Ash.
Easy.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.